The wind off Blackwater Bay carried a salty chill, threading through the red-gold curtains of Cersei Lannister's solar and stirring the single candle that still burned, despite dawn's pale glow. She had not slept. Cerulean shadows clung to the hollows beneath her lion-bright eyes, while a curl of her hair clung to the perspiration at her temple. Yet her smile, sharp as the Valyrian steel dagger resting on the lacquered writing desk, never faltered. In the purple hours before sunrise, the queen had made a decision that would reshape kingdoms, and such triumph required vigilance lest doubt seep in before ink dried. She dipped her quill, steady despite the tremor of long wakefulness, and scratched the opening lines upon a sheet of vellum so white it seemed to glow. To His Grace John of House Stark, King in the North, Lord of Winterfell, by the grace of the gods, and by the consent of his bannermen. The titles tasted like iron shavings in her mouth, but she wrote them all the same. Courtesy was the glove that concealed the claws. Myrcella slept in the adjoining chamber, unaware that her mother had just bartered her future for a tenuous leash on northern loyalty. Cersei paused, listening to her daughter's soft breathing through the marble archway, and for a heartbeat, the iron in her decision thawed. But sentiment was the luxury of the powerless, and Cersei Lannister had laid waste to too much weakness already. She signed her name with a flourish, sprinkled sand across the ink, then rang for Maester Balabar to send the raven. By the time light spilled over the parapets of the Red Keep, the black bird was winging northward, its message bound tight in crimson ribbon. The sky above Winterfell yawned pewter gray, promising another day of brittle cold, though spring should have crept in by now. Jon Stark, still ill at ease with the crown his kinsman had pressed upon his head, stood upon the battlements flanked by Sir Davos and Tormund Giantsbane. Below, the yard bustled with hammer clangs and barking dogs. The scent of boiled leather mingled with wood smoke, and somewhere a stable boy sang a bawdy song about a septa and a sellsword. Jon breathed deep, feeling the old stones hum beneath his boots, the way they had when he was a boy dreaming of the Wall. Now, the Wall lay behind him, half a kingdom away, broken in both stone and oaths. Each sunrise seemed to lay a heavier mantle across his shoulders, for his people survived by a fraying thread. Winter stores thinned, loyal houses still whispered of Robb, and Sansa paced the great hall like a caged direwolf, hunting for any slight that might imperil their fractured realm. A speck appeared against the clouds, wheeling once before angling toward the rookery. Ravens seldom arrived in the deep cold of morning, unless the tidings could not wait. Jon's hand drifted to the hilt of Longclaw, a reflex more than necessity, and he turned for the spiral stair, heart drumming with possibilities ranging from fresh depredations by the Night's Watch deserters to southern overtures he had no wish to entertain. Minutes later, Maester Walken unfurled the scroll inside the draft chill of the rookery, and his brow climbed higher with every line. When he finished, his eyes darted from Jon to the candle guttering between them, as though fearing its flame might leap up and devour the words. "It bears Queen Cersei's own seal," the Maester said, voice thin. "A marriage pact. She offers Princess Myrcella's hand in exchange for lasting peace and the North's fealty to the Iron Throne." Silence pooled like oil. Davos muttered a coarse prayer. Tormund spat into the straw, muttering that southern women smelled like milk and roses and trouble. Jon read the letter twice, the ink still fresh enough to smudge under his thumb, and imagined the Golden Queen smiling through the blood of every secret she'd spilled to secure this moment. Yet politics was the game he had never learned at Maester Aemon's knee. War he understood, sacrifice he had shouldered, but the fate of thousands might hinge upon the words he chose next. He thought of Arya tracing invisible pathways through the Godswood, of Bran's 1,000-yard stare, of Rickon's grave beneath the snows, and of Sansa, who had once worn Lannister crimson herself. He folded the parchment. "We hold counsel," he said. While the raven fought headwinds and storms, Cersei summoned Myrcella to the solar after breaking her fast upon figs and honey. The princess entered, cheeks flushed from morning rides along the outer bailey, sandy hair escaping a braid. Her eyes, warm Lannister green stripped of malice, brightened at the sight of her mother, unaware of the chains being forged around her wrists. "Sit," Cersei said, pouring sweet wine though it was hardly midday. Her daughter obliged. "I've received word from the north," she began, choosing the lie with care. "King Jon seeks reconciliation. He bears no love for the traitor Stannis' claim, and he has expressed admiration for your grace. He proposes a match." Myrcella's lashes fluttered. "Jon Stark, the bastard-made king?" Cersei forced a laugh, light as court gossip, hiding the ice in her marrow. "Not a bastard now. The North crowned him, and you, sweetling, could be queen in snowbound halls. Think of the songs." The girl's gaze turned inward, tracing fantasies across the air. Knights in wolf pelts, a hearth big as a barn, direwolves pacing the yard. But doubt pecked at her expression. "What of Tommen? His queen Margaery still sits the throne to the south. Tommen is safe." Cersei lied with a mother's ease. "The usurper's leeches nibble at every throne. We must weave alliances swiftly, lest the realm unravel. This marriage binds the lions and the wolves once more." "But Uncle Tyrion..." Cersei's fingernails bit the wine cup. "Tyrion's name was a blade sheathed in honey. Pay no mind to his treasons. Jon has no love for dwarfs or dragons, I assure you." Myrcella flushed, chastised. "If it pleases you, mother, I will go." Pride and sorrow mingled in Cersei's breast. Unfamiliar companions. She reached to tuck a wayward strand behind her daughter's ear. "It will please the kingdom, and that, my love, must please us all." In the courtyard, knights prepared an escort. Gold cloaks gleaming, black horses snorting plumes into the frigid air. Sir Jaime watched from the steps, face half in shadow beneath his hood. When Cersei joined him, their eyes spoke the words neither dared utter in earshot of the castle's gossip mongerers. "You give away our little girl as if she were chattel," Jaime said at last, voice raw. "I secure the realm's future." Cersei replied, "Would you see her raped by sellswords when the North marches south again? Or flayed by Boltons if Stark rule crumbles?" Men and shout. Jaime's jaw flexed. "You trade one terror for another." "Jon Snow is no terror," she said, though bitterness glazed every syllable. "He's a wolf cub who thinks honor a shield. Myrcella will wrap him around her finger, and through him I shall grip the North." Jaime's hand drifted to the pommel of his sword, a reflex without meaning since its edge had dulled to memory. "Do you truly believe that?" Cersei touched his wrist, a fleeting caress years in the making. "I believe we cannot afford to doubt ourselves. Not now, not ever." In Winterfell's great hall, banners of flayed men and krakens had been stripped away. The direwolf of Stark cracked in the drafts overhead. Yet Jon could not forget that these stones had witnessed Ramsay Bolton's horrors, nor that his own blood still stained the battlements he had retaken at such cost. Around the carved table sat Sansa, faces pale as the snows drifting outside. Lyanna Mormont, small in stature but fierce in gaze. Lord Glover, Maester Wolkan, and Sir Davos, whose weathered hands rested upon the table, as though steadying a ship in rough seas. Tormund lounged by the hearth with his axe across his knees, red beard splitting into a grin whenever talk turned grim. "The North bleeds from the last war," Lord Glover said, voice graveled by many seasons. "Food is scarce, coffers near empty. A marriage alliance might fill both." "With Lannister gold," Sansa replied, lip curling. "The very coin that paid to cut our brothers' throats." Lyanna's tiny fist thumped the tabletop. "The North remembers, my lady. We do not kneel to lions." Sir Davos cleared his throat, a peacemaker's rumble. "The North remembers. But winter remembers harder. If food convoys come by way of the King's Road under a Lannister banner, hungry mouths may not care whose coin purchased the grain." Jon listened, weighing every syllable like river stones in the palm. Strategy demanded compromise, honor demanded caution. Ghost lay stretched at his feet, red eyes fixed upon him, as though the direwolf sensed the turning of fate. He pictured Myrcella, a child of only 2 years when she last visited Winterfell, hair like spun gold, chasing kittens across the Godswood path. She had grown into near womanhood, if rumor held true. And John, crowned by necessity, dragged back from death by sorcerous means he scarcely comprehended, could not recall the last time he had looked at a maiden with anything but distant politeness. Sansa spoke again. Quieter now. We know what the Lannisters do to those who trust them. Father rode to King's Landing once. No. A fissure cracked the air. John met her eyes, and for a breath the hall rang with specters of Ned's honor and Joffrey's cruelty. Then John inhaled slow. If we refuse, he said, Cersei keeps her daughter and her armies, and we remain weak, alone between north winds and south spears. If we accept carefully, we gain time to heal, to gather grain, to rebuild walls. The north may yet stand free in all but name. Lyanna Mormont scowled. Bending the knee is bending the knee, your grace. John did not flinch. An ally is not a master. The north fought for Robb because the south butchered our kin, but vengeance does not plow fields. We are kings and lords because we protect our people. If Myrcella's dowry feeds every child from the neck to last hearth, is that not protection? And the words hung, trembling. Then Davos nodded. A marriage need not mean subjugation, my lords. It can be a bridge. A bridge made of ice, Sansa whispered, but her gaze softened by inches. She turned to John. If you choose this path, you must set the terms, not Cersei. Demand grain, ships, coin, and hostages for good faith. None show. John's mouth twitched at the corner, the shadow of a smile. You would have me keep Jaime Lannister here as honored guest. Best start with Lord Mathis Rowan, Sansa said dryly. Jaime might be too valuable, and the optics of a Kingslayer in Winterfell are complicated. Tormund guffawed. Keep the pretty knight. I'll share a mead with him. He slapped his knee. Tell him tales of wildling brides. A ripple of uneasy amusement passed through the hall. A rare moment of levity in months of dread. John sized it. Very well, he said. We shall reply. Terms will be drawn. Harsh terms. For this is the price of the North's trust. If Cersei agrees, Myrcella will come under safe escort. He looked at Sansa. You will guide me through the language. She nodded once, lips pressed thin. John rose, and the gathering followed. Outside the arrow-slit windows, the sun had cleared the clouds, gilding the yard in fleeting warmth. Snow melted upon the stones only to refreeze at dusk, but for this moment, Winterfell breathed. Across the neck, past Moat Cailin's ruined towers, across the frost-crusted fields of the Riverlands, Cersei's party advanced like a glimmering spear. Sir Osmond Kettleblack rode at the head with 50 gold cloaks. Behind him, Myrcella's litter bobbed upon heavy wheels draped in crimson silk. The princess peeked, through tasseled curtains, at peasants huddled in ditches, at burned holdfasts, at the bones of wagons, long since stripped for kindling. War's scars marred the countryside, yet the girl's heart beat with a thrill not wholly born of fear. Adventure brewed beyond the gilded cage of the capital. Maester Balabar dozed on the bench beside her, a ledger of trade commitments resting upon his quivering belly. The old man claimed they would establish a Lannister trade depot at White Harbor, a token of friendship. Myrcella wondered how tokens could weigh heavier than swords. At dusk of the 9th day they reached the ruins of Derry, where crows perched upon collapsed rafters and mists festered like ghostly entrails. The escort made camp amid charred stones, torches fluttering in the chill. Myrcella stood by the edge of a stagnant pond, breath curling white, and whispered a prayer to the mother. She asked for courage and for Jon Stark to be kind and perhaps handsome, though court tales painted him dour. Ser Osmond approached, oilskin cloak snapping. Best inside the pavilion, princess. Wolves prowl these parts. Deary wolves? She asked, unable to mask her curiosity. He smirked. No. Two-legged sort. Outlaws, deserters. But they bite all the same. Now. She followed, boots squelching in mud, feeling every mile wedge between herself and the Red Keep. The only home she had ever known. Yet a strange lightness fluttered in her chest. At court she was a pawn. On the King's Road she had become the wager. Beyond lay a castle of ancient kings, a king forged in snow, and perhaps a future where she might be more than a daughter spun into silk shackles. Ravens traded barbs through sleet and sun as terms rattled back and forth. Sansa's quill carved demands: grain shipments equal to 3 harvests, remission of all crown taxes for 10 years, Lannister engineers to repair the shattered moat bridges, and hostages, Lord Paxter Redwine's son and Lady Jean Westerling's daughter, to dwell in the north as wards. Cersei countered with offers trimmed lean as a sellsword's purse. Midwinter passed. The wall's icy breath crept deeper, and still negotiations danced like duelists. In that span, Winterfell stirred. Blacksmiths hammered chains for drawbridges. Carpenters patched roofs. Small folk streamed through the gates carrying bolts of wool and casks of salt beef, murmuring that the king in the north might wed a princess, and perhaps the snows would thaw early under such omens. Jon trained daily with Brienne of Tarth, whose arrival at Sansa's behest raised eyebrows and spirits alike. Their swords rang in the courtyard, while Ghost and Podrick Sparrow watched from the sidelines. Each clang seemed to chase ghosts of coalition warfare from Jon's mind, sharpening him for the peace that might come. Yet nights found him alone beneath the unfinished canopy of his solar, scanning the terms drafted by Sansa's shrewd hand. He pictured Myrcella's face. How innocence might survive her mother's tutelage. How she would fare among wolfish northerners who had not forgotten Lannister gold on Bolton blades. He wondered if she feared him. He wondered if he feared himself. The envoy crossed the last river beneath an aurora that danced green ribbons across black sky. At the ford of Sedge, a welcome party awaited. Lord Manderley's banners snapping sea green, the direwolf of Stark beside the leaping trout of Tully. Torches lit a corridor of faint warmth through night's bitter bite. Myrcella stepped from her litter, furs piled upon shoulders, and stared at the north for the first time. Ancient trees clawed against distant stars, the air so clear she tasted pine and iron on her tongue. Lord Manderley bowed with courtly grace, belly like a sail in storm wind. "Your Highness," he boomed, "Winterfell awaits. Be welcome." "Nan damsel," she curtsied, voice catching with cold and courtesy alike. "My lord." Behind her, Sir Jaime, released from Cersei's side to safeguard his niece, dismounted in plain cloak of slate gray. His eyes flickered with caution, scanning every tree line. Myrcella found comfort in his presence, though she sensed he loathed every snowflake. He would remain only until oaths were sworn, then ride south again, leaving her alone amid strangers. The column marched north through days where sun shone diamond bright upon the crusted drifts and nights where wolves howled beyond the torchline. On the 12th dawn, the towers of Winterfell rose from mist, broad shoulders of weathered stone draped in snow, a fortress that seemed older than sin. Smoke spiraled from chimneys. The clang of forge hammers echoed across the frosted weirwood leaves. Myrcella's heart hammered as trumpets sounded. A hush fell upon the yard. Snow flurried, swirling like pale petals. And then he was there, a tall youth in black and gray, a white wolf pacing at his heel, a sword upon his hip that glimmered faintly despite the weak sun. His hair, dark as raven wings, ruffled in the breeze, and his eyes, deep and still as forest pools, fixed upon her with a solemn curiosity. Princess and king regarded one another across the span of cracked courtyard stones, the hush stretching tight enough to shatter. Myrcella lowered her hood, golden hair spilling, cheeks aflame with cold. She curtsied, recalling her mother's warning, "Win his heart, turn it golden." Jon inclined his head, the barest nod of royal courtesy, though something softer flickered behind his eyes. Surprise perhaps at her youth, or at the fragility that no armor could hide. He drew breath, and his voice, when it emerged, was rough as cedar bark, yet gentle. "Princess Myrcella, I bid you welcome to Winterfell, your home, if you wish it." She lifted her gaze to his and found, to her relief, neither ridicule nor cruelty, only gravity and a hint of shy warmth. The white wolf sniffed her glove, deciding she posed no threat, and trotted back to its master. Myrcella exhaled a plume that curled between them like a bridge of frost and hope. Jaime Lannister approached, cloak brushing the snow, Jon's expression hardened by instinct, but he extended his hand, black glove against gilded lion. "My lord," Jaime said, voice steady. "I deliver my niece into your charge under the stipulations your sister and queen have ratified." Jon gripped his forearm in the manner of warriors. "She will be treated with every courtesy. You have my word." The Kingslayer searched his face for betrayal, finding none. He released his grip with a nod. Sansa emerged from the gatehouse steps, red hair braided like wildfire beneath a gray hood lined with fox. Her eyes swept over Myrcella, calculating, cautious, and then she smiled, a practiced but not unkind curve. "Come," she said, offering an arm to the princess. "The hearths are warm, and cooks have prepared dishes you may not know. Sister's stew, oatcakes with molasses. The North welcomes its guests." Myrcella glanced once more at Jon, who watched her with an unreadable intensity, then allowed Sansa to guide her toward the castle's yawning doors. Behind, the yard stirred to life. Hostlers taking bridles, guards exchanging gossip, small folk pressing for a glimpse of the southern lioness among wolves. The great oak doors groaned shut, sealing warmth inside and the gathering twilight out. Yet outside, winds shifted across the battlements, carrying the scent of burning peat to the cold stars. Somewhere beyond the wall, a horn sounded. One long note, then silence. But neither Jon nor the realm heard it, for all ears within Winterfell strained toward the laughter echoing from the hall where lion and wolf might, for a season, feast together. Days lengthened into an uneasy peace. Myrcella awoke each morning in chambers once occupied by Lady Catelyn, their tapestries rehung, fireplaces crackling with pine. She learned to lace her gowns without a retinue, to navigate corridors that twisted like roots, to greet the stable boys by name. When she spoke in the courtyard, her breath formed silver filigree. When she wrote letters home, her ink froze in the well, and she resorted to warming it by candle. Sansa became her tutor in northern customs. The proper reverence before the heart tree, the names of every bannerman's wife and children, the tragedies that still bled. They walked the godswood paths arm in arm, red leaves drifting at their feet like shed tears. In those quiet hours, Myrcella saw shadows behind Sansa's smiles. Ghosts wearing lion crowns and wolf pelts both, and she understood that trust must be coaxed, not claimed. Jon, meanwhile, spent daylight hours inspecting grain stores, dispatching ravens, drilling archers in the yard. He spoke little at meals, though his gaze sometimes lingered on the princess with a curiosity that mirrored her own. When they did speak, it was of simple things. The color of the dawn sky over Moat Cailin, the sound ravens made before snow, the challenge of teaching Ghost not to steal meat pies. Yet each conversation spun an invisible thread between them, delicate yet obstinate as spider silk. Ghost attached himself to Myrcella, sensing perhaps the turmoil she cloaked beneath courtesy. The direwolf padded beside her through the bailey, white coat gleaming against her crimson mantle. Children of the garrison whispered that the princess wielded sorcery over beasts. Myrcella merely scratched behind Ghost's ear and felt calmer than she had since leaving King's Landing. One night, she found Jon alone by the parapets, moonlight silvering his hair. Below, lanterns floated on the glassy surface of the Godswood pool. Lanterns Sansa had set adrift in memory of the dead. Myrcella joined him, wrapping her cloak tighter. "I'm told these lanterns guide spirits home," she said. Jon nodded, gaze distant. Home is a difficult path. They watched a lantern snag upon an eddy, spinning before breaking free. Myrcella swallowed. "My home is far behind me. I know it will never be the same when I return. If I return." He turned to her fully, frost catching on his lashes. "I know something of leaving home behind." Their breath mingled in the air, rasping like wings. Myrcella dared to ask, "Do you regret agreeing to this alliance?" Jon's brows furrowed. "Regret would dishonor those who rely on me. Yet I question. So do I." she whispered. Every night. Ghost padded forward, settling at their feet with a huff. John's lips quirked. Half smile, half sigh. He offered his arm. Walk with me. They circled the ramparts, boots crunching ice, and spoke of everything but marriage. Of the songs Rhaegar Targaryen once sang. Of markets in White Harbor that sold lavender to mask the salt air. Of the last days Jon spent as a boy in Winterfell, before the wall called his name. Myrcella listened, weaving fragments of his tale into her own, until their steps took them full circle. When they parted at her chamber door, Jon bowed. Not as a king to a subject, but as a friend to another. Myrcella touched the latch long after he left, feeling her heart beat a rhythm she did not yet know. Far to the south, Cersei Lannister stood before the Iron Throne, hands clasped behind her back. Qyburn approached, robes whispering. Our informants report Princess Myrcella acclimating well, he said. The Northern Lords have begun sending tribute once more. Cersei's smile was thin. Good. And Lord Baelish? He rides east, sowing dissent. He claims Sansa Stark means to usurp her brother. The Vale will watch with interest. Dah. Let them watch, Cersei murmured, eyes fixed upon the throne's blade-lined height. When they blink, I shall strike. Qyburn bowed. The queen watched him depart, then ascended 2 steps of the throne's dais, fingertips brushing cold steel. Somewhere beyond the capitals of copper and iron, her daughter wove spells of courtesy. Cersei trusted neither kindness nor fate. She trusted only leverage, and she had placed a golden hook in the gullet of the north. Whether the fish would thrash loose or drag the lioness beneath the ice remained to be seen. Winter deepened. Snowdrifts climbed to the knees of statues, and the weirwood's face wore a crown of crystalline spikes. Yet within Winterfell's walls, fires burned hot and laughter grew more frequent. A contest of storytelling filled the hall on the first new moon. Lyanna Mormont recited a saga of she-bears slaying ironborn pirates, while Myrcella spun a southern tale of Florian the Fool, gilding each turn with modest flourishes. Jon watched from high table, his smile flickering each time the princess's eyes found his across the trestled benches. Later, as guests retired, Jon approached. He offered a hand, ungloved, warm from the hearth, and led her to the quiet of the godswood. Breathless, Myrcella followed, skirts brushing frost-bitten grass. Torchlight glimmered upon the heart tree's red bark. Jon paused, turning to face her beneath its bloody leaves. Myrcella, he began. Softer than snowmelt, her name upon his tongue sent a shiver through her spine. Before he could continue, a horn blast shattered the hush. 3 short notes from the ramparts. Alarm. Both turned toward the walls where torches flared and figures scrambled. Moments later, a rider burst through the gate, horse lathered, armor rimed with ice. Gore spattered his surcoat of night black. White Walkers, he rasped, collapsing from the saddle. They ride south. Fear slashed Winterfell's fragile peace. Jon knelt beside the dying ranger, wiping icy sweat from the man's brow. Where? He demanded. Last hearth. Lost. They come. The ranger's eyes rolled white. Sansa arrived, robe flying with Sir Davos at her heels. Myrcella stepped back. Heart hammering, she had heard stories of the White Walkers, but tales in brothels and libraries could not match the stench of death steaming from the man's wounds. Jon rose, face carved of granite. Sound the muster. Wake every bannerman, the dead march. Panic rippled through the courtyard. Myrcella felt Tormund's massive hand on her shoulder. Into the keep, girl. This business is for steel and fire. And now. Jon spared her one glance. Heavy with regret yet resolute with duty, before vanishing into the chaos of torchlight and shouts. Ghost bounded at his side, white fur a streak amid the milling crowd, and the heart tree's visage seemed to weep ruby tears into the snow. Myrcella stood frozen, the warmth of storytelling and laughter crumbling to dust within her chest. The north that had felt like budding sanctuary now roared with war once more, and her place within it teetered on a blade's edge. The next dawn painted the sky a bruised violet. War councils gathered in the great hall. Maps spread across tables, black arrows marking paths the dead might take. Jon stood at the center, hair unbound, eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. Sansa directed scribes, her voice clear. Lord Manderley cursed, shipping lanes frozen shut. Arya returned from her wanderings at news of the impending threat, leaned against a pillar sharpening needle with deliberate strokes. Myrcella slipped through the gathered throng, unnoticed until she reached Jon's side. He started, then offered a tight smile that did not reach his eyes. "I should help," she said. "I know Southern supply routes, Crown garrisons still loyal." He lifted a hand, gentle. "Your safety comes first. The crypts, no." Her voice quivered, but she steadied it. "Hiding will not save the North. Myrcella's dowry includes coin. Coin buys wildling spears, Freeritter archers, wheat for the holdfasts along the King's Road. Let me write to Lord Rowan, to House Tarley. Some may still honor me if not the Queen." Jon studied her, conflict warring across his face. "You would appeal to men your mother might soon name enemies. I would appeal to men who fear the dead more than lions." She drew a breath. "Your fight is mine now, or so vows would have it if we wed. Allow me this." A hush enfolded them. Then he nodded, once, trusting. A spark leapt in Myrcella's chest as she called for quills, parchment, Qyburn's cipher keys she had memorized in secret lessons. She would spin spider silk across the realm, threads Cersei could not sever in time. War loomed. Yet amid its shadow, alliances thickened, not of convenience, but of shared peril and wary hope. And in the quiet spaces between horn blasts and marching boots, Jon Snow and Myrcella Lannister began to see in each other something no treaty could dictate. The possibility of a future neither had imagined, forged in winter's crucible, tempered by blood, and lit by the fragile flame of trust. Storms of snow and sorcery gathered beyond the wall, where eyes like blue lanterns surveyed the living world. In King's Landing, Cersei received Myrcella's letters intercepted by Qyburn's spies. Pleas for aid addressed not to her, but to lords of the Reach and the Stormlands. The lioness paced the length of the solar, rage whittling her down to a naked blade. "They forget who wields the Iron Throne," she hissed. Qyburn bowed. "Shall I dispatch birds refuting her authority?" "No." Cersei's smile was a scythe. "We shall let her build her pretty alliances. When winter devours them, the lion will feast on the remains." Yet doubt, a forbidden weed, sprouted in the cracks of her certainty. For she had once thought fire a slave to her will, and wildfire had consumed her father's legacy all the same. Perhaps in sending Myrcella north, she had loosed a spark she could not smother. Black banners against white sky. The dead advanced, their ranks a tide of silent blades and brittle bones. At Winterfell, fires were lit along the walls, trenches filled with pitch, archers posted shoulder to shoulder. The living Northmen, wildlings, men of the Vale dispatched by Lord Royce, even a smattering of riverlords swayed by Myrcella's letters, waited with uncertain breath. Jon buckled his breastplate, direwolf crest glinting. Myrcella approached in mail scaled with gold, a gift from Sansa hastily refitted. She pressed a small package into Jon's gauntleted hand. A ribbon of Myrcella's hair bound with a strip of wolf fur. "In the Reach," she murmured. "Knights carry favors from their ladies into battle for fortune." Jon swallowed. "I have never been fortunate." She smiled, soft, trembling. "Then perhaps you shall be tonight." Their fingers brushed. Time thinned to a single heartbeat. Then horns blared. Drums rumbled like distant thunder. Jon drew Longclaw and raised it high. The cheering that followed shook glistening snow from parapets. The gates opened, disgorging cavalry into the frost-shrouded fields beyond. Among them galloped Lyanna Mormont, astride a shaggy Garin, banner streaming. Arya slipped through the ranks like a shadow on the wind. Ser Jaime rode beside Brienne, gold armor dulled with soot, eyes set upon redemption. And Myrcella, princess of lions, ward of wolves, remained upon the battlements, torch in hand, ready to set the pitch ablaze at Jon's signal. Her breath curled upward, mingling with embers and prayer. In that frozen moment, before sword met sorcery, before screams shattered night, she felt the north settle inside her bones, cold, unyielding, alive. The bargain her mother had forged had melted in the heat of shared purpose, reforged into something neither lion nor wolf could have predicted. Whatever dawn emerged beyond the long dark, Myrcella knew she would meet it beneath a sky of torn banners and rising crows. And whether she wore a crown of gold or snow, she would carve her own fate into the annals of a world reborn by fire and ice. A hush like the breath before a tempest swept the battlements when the first rank of wights appeared. They came without herald, surfacing from the blizzard's white curtain the way rocks break through a retreating tide. Their outlines at first little more than black flecks against a world drained of color. Then the moon slid from behind a scudding cloud, and every eye atop Winterfell's walls saw what marched. A horizon of dead flesh and broken armor. Gaunt rib cages grinning beneath chainmail. Arrows jutting from breastbones that no longer bled. Tattered banners of long-perished houses, whipping in a wind made colder by their passing. Limbs that should have stiffened to splinters moved like puppets behind whose strings lay only the will of ice. Jon stood on the inner rampart above the gatehouse. Longclaw rested across his shoulders. The pale fire of the torches licked the Valyrian steel and threw phantom wolves in every direction. He watched for the walkers themselves, tall, pale riders whose frost blades could shear iron. But at first he saw only the masses they drove forward. The strategy was unchanged since Hardhome. Drown the living beneath an avalanche of corpses, then step in to reap what panicked resistance remained. A horn blast boomed over the yard, one note, deep and resolute. Archers shuffled to the crenellations, knocking flame-tipped shafts. Lyanna Mormont's small voice pierced the clamor. Loose! 100 bowstrings snapped. A red-feathered volley climbed into the night, hovered like a constellation, then plunged. Flames blossomed amid the horde, but they only slowed. Jon felt the impact through the stones as bodies pushed forward, trampling burning whites beneath unfeeling boots. Snow hissed to steam around fire-soaked flesh. The stench of charred meat twisted the air. Somewhere down in the trench, the first bundles of pitch-soaked brush were tossed ablaze, crackling into a serpentine mote of light. The dead who tumbled into it flared like torches, yet still others crawled over them. Behind the blazing ring, the main bulk pressed on, unaffected, impelled by the will that guided them. A shout rose from the Dothraki flank. Mance Rayder had whipped into a ragtag cavalry. Black stallions reared, hooves beating time with shrieks as riders swung araks wrapped in wildfire cloth. They galloped past the trench, through a gap left open for the sally. Green flames trailed their blades, painting whorls against the dark. They carved paths through the whites, each sweep severing heads and hands that spasmed on the ground like dying crabs. But for every corpse felled, 3 more rose in its place. Soon the charge slowed, became a swirl, then a knot, swallowed by sheer numbers. Green flares winked out one by one, and the night pressed in again. Jon turned his head just enough to catch Davos' grim silhouette at his side. "Signal the trebuchets," he ordered, voice low so the wind would not whisk it away. Davos raised a lantern, green glass shielding wildfire within, then swung it in a practiced arc. From behind the east wall came a wooden groan like giants waking. Counterweights crashed down and flaming barrels arced overhead. They burst beyond the trench in thunderous blossoms, spreading liquid emerald across the ranks of dead. Limbs blackened and cracked, skulls burst, but the fire's fury soon faltered where snow smothered it. The barrage bought moments, nothing more. Footsteps clattered up the stair. Arya arrived, cheeks raw, braid plastered to her neck with sweat that froze even as it formed. Needle dripped the inky blood of a dead thing she'd dispatched on her way. "They're piling bodies against the southwest trench," she reported. "At this rate they'll bridge it within the hour." Jon's jaw clenched. Ghost, bristling at his heel, lifted a muzzle smeared with black ichor and snarled into the gale. "Pull the reserve barrels to that sector," Jon said, "and tell Gendry to ready the scorpions." If the walkers appear, I'll put a dragon glass bolt between their eyes." Arya finished, a feral half-smile flashing white in flickering torchlight. She slid down the stair rail before Jon could answer, a shadow flickering away. Inside the castle, Myrcella stood in the northern parapet gallery that looked down upon the yard. The letter table before her was strewn with half-finished missives. Please to Old Town and Storm's End, drafts offering Visenya's chain to house Valerion, if their fleet would brave the narrow sea iced, halfway to Summerhall. But ink congealed faster than treaties, even with the brazier blazing at her back. She could feel frost inching across her quills. She pressed a palm flat against the cold stone sill and stared at the carnage outside. The way the night itself seemed to crawl forward on hands and knees. Behind her Sansa entered, cloak crimson against her pale shift. "The ravens will not fly in this wind," she said, voice level though her hands were shaking inside her sleeves. "You've done what you can. Come down to the Great Hall. The wounded are arriving. They could use steady fingers." "I was trained in letters, not leeches," Myrcella murmured. "You have a lighter touch than most of us," Sansa replied, and the compliment, for once shorn of calculation, pulled Myrcella from the window. They descended together through torchlit spirals to the hall, where trestle tables had been turned into operating boards. Maesters and midwives sawed through leather and mail, spooned boiling onion poultices into wounds that would freeze shut otherwise. The smell, blood, rot pine pitch, hit like a mailed fist. Myrcella swallowed the urge to retch. A boy of perhaps 12 lay nearest, lips blue-white, a wooden shaft protruding from his belly. When the maester looked up with eyes that screamed for one more pair of hands, she moved without thinking, pressing linen to a spurting artery, while the old man rummaged for dragon-glass scalpel shards. Each beat of the boy's heart splashed red warmth across her wrists. The lioness of King's Landing died a little then, and a she-wolf was born, tempered in gore. Outside, the trench finally failed at the southwest. Frozen corpses stacked until flame met packed ice and hissed impotent. Over the ghastly mound poured the next wave. Fresh, unburned, unbroken. Jon barked orders down to Sir Helman Talhart's infantry, waiting behind the inner palisade. Spears angled outward. Shields overlapped. The men braced. When the flood hit, wood shuddered, iron tips snapped or held, and within breaths, the fight turned to a heaving morass of bodies locked in desperate clutch. Dragon-glass daggers flashed, obsidian found bone. Yet when a dead man fell, the hand still grasping a stark spear jerked, rose, and stabbed its former comrades. Identifying friend from foe became impossible beneath the pale blue lanterns of dead eyes. Thunder rippled far overhead. Jon lifted his gaze. Silhouettes circled the clouds, winged, monstrous. Rhaegal and Viserion dove through the spitting snow, emerald and corpse-white flames chasing each other. Daenerys rode Rhaegal bareheaded, silver hair fanning behind, cheeks flushed with fury. But across the sky, the Night King straddled Viserion's ruined spine, and when he pointed a long crackling spear of ice, the other dragon screamed and banked. Rhaegal spewed green fire over the ridge of undead archers, incinerating them to soot. But Viserion answered with a torrent of blue hell that chewed a swath of roof tiles from Winterfell's granary, sending flaming debris cascading into the godswood. Jon's heart lurched. Supplies meant survival after the battle. Now sparks leapt from the storehouse roof like 100 doomed ravens. "Archers, scorpions," he roared down the yard. Gendry and his smiths dragged an iron-framed ballista onto the rampart, winching the sinew cable until it sang. A bolt as thick as a man's leg, tipped in dragon glass, thunked into the channel. Jon grabbed the lever himself. He waited for Viserion's next banking pass, wingtips skimming the top of the godswood. As the beast wheeled, ribcage glowing within as if coals nestled under translucent skin, Jon felt every muscle align. The draw of the bowstring, the tremble of the rampart beneath his feet, the breath of air swirling icy flakes between them. He exhaled. A shrill whistle cut the night. The bolt streaked upward like black lightning and struck high on Viserion's neck. Chips of frozen scale exploded. The white dragon reeled, shrieking, but did not fall. The barb had lodged shallow, lacking weight to pierce fully. Yet even that wound bought regal room. Daenerys wheeled her mount around to strafe the right flank, torching another knot of whites that clambered up the walls. Below, Lyanna Mormont's voice rose shrill. A giant, undead, one of one Weg's kin left behind at Hardhome, lumbered through the breach where the trench had failed. Its skull was caved on one side, one blue eye pulsed like a dying comet. It swung a tree trunk, scattering Northmen like tenpins. Lyanna's small contingent rallied, arrows plinking off the giant's ribs. None slowed it. Lyanna tossed aside her bow, drew a child's longsword almost her own height. "For Bear Island!" she shrieked. Charging, the giant swatted her sideways. Ribs cracked like snapped harp strings. She rolled, bleeding, but rose again. She sprinted under the thing's legs and plunged the sword into its heel. Roaring, it dropped to one knee. She scrambled up its back, clawing at torn sinew. Dragonglass dagger forked between her teeth. At the base of its skull, she stabbed once, twice. On the third thrust, black frost exploded outward. The giant toppled, crushing a knot of lesser whites. Lyanna slid down its breastbone and collapsed beside it. Jon watched helpless, too far, too beset by his own battle, while her bannerman carried her limp body through a side gate. Her scream, her triumph, her stillness, each struck him harder than any blade. Time blurred. Jon could measure minutes only by the dwindling quivers, shattered shields, and piles of burning corpses. Snow melted to red mud beneath the fighters' boots, then froze again, trapping bodies in gruesome tableau. Everywhere was sound, steel on bone, bone on stone, the crack of frost, the roar of dragons, the frantic hammering of his own blood in his ears. A horn call lifted, 3 blasts. Enemy in the courtyard. Jon spun. Somehow, somewhere, a knot of dead had scaled the inner wall, while eyes fixed on the gatehouse. They poured over the parapet behind the kitchens. Myrcella exited the great hall at that moment with a bowl of boiling water, her arms slicked to the elbow in blood. She saw the first white leap the wall and land atop a kennel boy. She screamed, not fear, but warning. Podrick Payne sprinted from the stable with a shovel aflame in pitch. He swung wildly, setting one corpse alight, but the others swarmed. Myrcella darted forward, snatched a fallen spear, and jabbed at the nearest skull. The spear glanced off brazen helm. An armored hand caught her wrist. She felt ice through leather like a brand. Just as the white pulled her into its serrated grin, Ghost hit it broadside. Jaws closed on its throat. White fur streaked with gore as he shook. The others converged upon the direwolf, blades hacking. Myrcella snatched Pod's dagger, a jagged obsidian shard in deer antler hilt, and slammed it into the back of the hand clutching her arm. The fingers fell away like brittle twigs. Ghost rolled free, fur matted, one ear half gone. More whites vaulted from the wall. Myrcella backed until the courtyard well pressed into her spine. Steel flashed above her, Brienne's longsword carving a half-circle moon. She bellowed something wordless. Righteous. The white's head flew. Jaime fought at her side, golden hand wrapped in chain, left arm guiding a bastard sword. Together they wedged a wedge through the cordon, shoving Myrcella behind them. Yet numbers pressed too great. Then Arya appeared, sliding beneath a lunging corpse, needle finding the soft palate. She spun, cat grace, flicking a dragonglass glaive from a back loop. The polearm's crescent edge sliced 3 stomachs apart. Viscera steaming, the whites still clawed forward. Fall back to the hall, Brienne commanded. No, Myrcella said. Her voice, though hoarse, rang above the din. We lose this yard, we trap our own within a tomb. Stand. She yanked the spear free, planted its butt in the mud, braced. Jaime's eyes widened with something akin to pride. He took position opposite her, mirrored stance. Brienne laughed, a booming sound of approval, then set her shield like a tower wall. Podrick copied, trembling but resolute. Arya twirled her staff and nodded. They held the line 4 heartbeats, 8. Dragonglass and Valyrian steel shrieked through frozen ribs. Bodies mounted at their boots, but always 2 more replaced one fallen. Ghost leapt, bit, fell back, leapt again. Suddenly, a horn sounded single blast, reserve cavalry. Jon had seen the breach from the rampart. He left command to Davos and gathered what mounted men yet lived. Now they thundered through the side gate, hooves striking sparks on cobbles. Jon rode at their head, Longclaw blazing with set fire, its edge a river of molten starlight. He cut the first white from shoulder to hip. Momentum and steel carried the blow through 3 more. The wedge smashed into the dead, scattering them to either side like wheat before a scythe. Jon reined up by Myrcella. For a heartbeat eyes met amid flurries. She opened her mouth to speak, but he spurred forward, chasing the retreating line to the breach and sealing it with steel. Then he dismounted and climbed the wall again. Command could not stand absent. Inside the hall, Sansa knelt over Lyanna Mormont. The girl's lungs rattled, blood spilling from the corner of her mouth with each breath. The maester shook his head. Sansa grasped the small blood-smeared hand, tears freezing on her cheeks. "You will be sung," she whispered. "The Mormont line will roar your name for 10,000 winters." Lyanna's eyes, fierce to the last, gleamed with pleasure. She tried to lift her chin. The motion jolted pain through her cracked ribs. "Tell my mother, the cub died a bear." The words faded on her final breath. Sansa closed the girl's lids, then stood slowly, a queen steeled by sorrow. "Raise Bear Island's banner higher," she commanded the nearest guard. "Let the dead know her line endures." Outside, Daenerys and Rhaegal harried Viserion to the North Ridge. The Night King loosed another spear, ice meeting emerald flame halfway, shattering sparks across the sky. A shard lodged in Rhaegal's shoulder, blood hissed to crystal. The dragon screamed, wing beats faltering. Daenerys clung to the harness, urging him upward. Viserion banked, blue fire trailing, but Rhaegal managed a last, desperate burst. Green conflagration caught the white dragon's left wing, melting sinew. Viserion spiraled earthward, slamming into the tree line beyond the shivering sea road. Trees exploded, blue flame geysered. The Night King vaulted clear, landing soundlessly amid snowdrifts. Jon saw the fall. He shouted for Bran, wheelchair-bound beneath the weirwood, eyes rolled white. The 3-eyed raven had waited hours, ravens swirling in black vortex overhead. Now his gaze snapped forward. "He comes," Bran murmured, voice both boyish and ancient. The Night King appeared at the Godswood Gate, flanked by 6 lieutenants whose ice armor hissed under nearby torches. Blue eyes fixed upon Bran as though upon a prize long coveted. Jon charged down the stair, boots slipping on blood. He crashed through the arch, sword high. Before he reached Bran, 3 walkers stepped between. Their blades glittered pale, as if carved from winter's first breath. Jon swung Longclaw. The first parried with unnatural speed. Shock reverberated up his arms. The second slashed. He ducked, feeling the air freeze against his nape. Ghost lunged, but an ice spear hurled him sideways, yelping. Jon turned, parried, spun. Sparks hissed where Valyrion met ice. Dragonglass arrows whizzed from the battlements, Gendry's scorpions. But the walkers knocked them aside with effortless turns of the wrist. One raised its sword for a killing stroke when a silver blur darted through. Arya, leap propelled by a burial mound at the weirwood's base. She drove her dragonglass spear straight through the walker's neck. Frost exploded. Shards rained. The creature shattered. Jon pivoted and took the opening, cleaving the second from crown to collar. It burst in a silent flash, limbs tumbling as separate icicles. The third, seeing comrades fall, retreated to its master's side. The Night King did not react, save a faint tilt of lips that might have been a smile. Myrcella had followed at a distance, drawn by some invisible tether. She entered the Godswood now, dragging Ghost's flank with her. She had looped a length of torn banner under the wolf's ribcage. The animal limped, but upon sight of the Night King it snarled, despite pain. Jon stood shield-like between them and the frozen monarch. The Night King lifted his spear, aiming not at Jon but at Bran. Bran met his gaze with bottomless calm. Myrcella cried out, wordless, and stepped forward. The distraction gave Jon half a heartbeat. He hurled Longclaw two-handed. The blade whirled end over end, bright, unstoppable. It slammed point first through the Night King's breastplate, sinking to the hilt. Cracks spiderwebbed across the ice armor. For a span of breaths, nothing happened. Then the Night King grasped the blade's crossguard, wrenched it free, and let it clatter to snow. Jon felt his own heart shatter. The monster's eyes glowed brighter, as though gloating. He raised the spear again. A whisper shivered through the godswood. No mortal tongue, but the creak of boughs older than empires. White ravens erupted from the canopy, swirling lanterns of living pages. Bran's eyes rolled back. He spoke not with voice but with wind. Leaves stirred, though no breeze blew. The weirwood's face shed a single tear of red sap that sizzled upon the Night King's gauntlet. Smoke rose. Sudden comprehension flashed across the ancient fiend's face. First fear Jon had ever seen in those glacier eyes. Bran reached out, not physically, but in some realm behind sight. The Night King took one step back. Arya flowed forward, silent as moonshadow. In her offhand glinted the cat's paw dagger, Valyrian steel edge rippling dark rainbow hues. She leapt. The Night King turned, spear sweeping. Jon shouted. Arya feinted, dropped the dagger from right to left hand mid-air. An echo of her training dance. She buried it under his ribs. Everything froze. No sound, no motion, as if the world inhaled. Cracks raced over the Night King's skin. Frost blossomed like lethal flowers. He shattered. The lieutenants collapsed after. Then the wights beyond the wall stuttered, juddered, and fell like marionettes whose strings were severed. From ramparts to fields, a hush deeper than silence swept. Only the crackle of distant flames remained. It was dawn when the living tallied their dead. Bodies lay strewn in drifts. Northmen, wildlings, Vale Knights, Ironborn, free folk, and those fallen twice, first to death, then to undeath. Pyres rose as high as towers. Black smoke climbed into the pink sky like apocalyptic banners that would scar memory forever. Jon oversaw the digging of a temporary grave for the Night King's shards. They dared not burn nor bury near roots. Arya sat under the heart tree. Blood dried in a brown mask across her cheek. The empty dagger hilt cradled in her lap. Its blade had dissolved to ash. Bran still gazed distant, seeing unseen paths. Myrcella and Sansa walked the silent yard. They stopped before a heap of shields where Lyanna Mormont's tiny body lay upon linen. The bare island banner covered her, paw print dark against snow. Myrcella traced the sigil, tears making tracks through grime on her cheek. Her courage saved scores, she whispered. And your courage saved us in the yard, Sansa replied, voice hoarse. King Stark saw that. Myrcella stared across the bailey where Jon knelt beside a wounded wildling girl, tying splints with the same care he'd show a sister. He is king because he serves, she said. And you would serve beside him? Myrcella brushed stray hair behind her ear. The simple motion felt foreign after battle. If he desired it. If the North would have a lioness among wolves. Sansa laid a hand on her forearm, gentle but firm. The North wants whoever bleeds for it. Nothing speaks truer than that. Benadaru. Above them, ravens circled the scorched granary, swooping in and out like shadows knitting night back together. One landed on the well, and let out a single, plaintive croak. Myrcella remembered tossing breadcrumbs at ravens in the Red Keep's garden as a child. Back then, they seemed mischievous, harmless. Now she knew them as messengers of fate. Jaime approached, armor dented, face white with fatigue. He bowed his head to Sansa, then turned to Myrcella. I sent a rider south, he said softly. Your mother will learn of the battle within a fortnight, perhaps sooner if the winds favor. Myrcella's throat tightened. She imagined Cersei's reaction, relief at victory tainted by fury that her daughter's loyalty had shifted. Let her know we live, she said, and that the North stands. She will read defiance. I hope she reads truth. Jaime smiled, weary pride etched in the lines around his eyes. You sound like your father when he spoke in council. Idealistic and dangerous. Idealism is only dangerous to those who fear change. He chuckled, coughed, winced at cracked ribs. And change terrifies every man of power I've known. They looked out across the yard, where bodies were lifted onto pyres. Fires kindled, orange against dawn. The smell of smoke and rendered fat mingled with pine. Jon approached, dirt streaking his cheeks like war paint. Ghost limped beside him, bandaged in linen. Jon's eyes found Myrcella's. Exhaustion lay heavy on his shoulders, yet something steadier shone beneath, a recognition forged in battle. He halted before her, silent. Words seemed inadequate. Myrcella broke the quiet first. The realm will speak of this night for 1,000 years. They will sing of the king who stood against death. Then, Jon shook his head. They will sing of the girl who slew it. Arya strode up, rolling her eyes. Let them sing later. She jabbed a thumb at the pyres. We still have dead to burn, and we're nearly out of onions. Sansa arched a brow. If only the realm's survival depended on onions, we might finally beat the Reachers at their game. Jon managed a faint smile. We'll barter for more, grain too. The snows will thaw. Trade will resume. Eight cost. Myrcella finished quietly. Crown levies, new tariffs, debts my mother will wield. Jon nodded. And we'll answer with what we bought tonight. Unity, North Vale Riverlands, even your own Stormlanders if your letters sway them. Cersei's gold shines less bright beneath this dawn. Myrcella inhaled icy air, feeling it fill her lungs like a baptism. Then we press advantage. Rally Lord still on the fence. Ride south before she hardens her defenses. Sansa touched Jon's elbow. Your men need rest, your coffers need food, and your bones need healing. March 2. Soon and victory here becomes defeat at Blackwater. When Jon's gaze drifted to the rising smoke. When the pyres burn down, he said, we will see what strength remains. He turned to Myrcella. And when the time comes, will you ride at my side? Not as hostage, not as bargain, but as partner? Snowflakes landed on her lashes, melting instantly in the furnace of her heart. I will, she whispered. She offered her gloved hand. He took it, calloused fingers closing over slender ones. A vow sealed without pomp or parchment. Days stretched into weeks of grim rebuilding. The granary roof was patched with salvaged tin. Rhaegal's wounded wing regained strength. Daenerys and her advisors arrived from Dragonstone, bringing barrels of grain and quarrels of resentment. Alliances were shifting like sand at tide's edge. Yet the Khaleesi's eyes softened when she saw the bond forming between Jon and the Golden Princess, who moved among the tents, checking on broken soldiers with a word of Highgarden healing lore she had gleaned from chapbooks in the capital. Tyrion Lannister soon followed, escorted by Unsullied. He greeted Myrcella with a bow, low enough to mock court tradition and affection both. Niece, he said, I see you traded silk slippers for wolf pelts. They fit warmer. She replied, kissing his cheek despite dried gore. Tyrion's smile wobbled. He turned quickly to inspect the state of the ramparts lest anyone see tears glimmering. Council after council filled the great hall. Gendry hammered new dragonglass spearheads. Podrick trained with Brienne until arms shook. Davos audited stores. Bran charted visions of scorpions hidden in every shadow. In the quiet hush before dawn, Myrcella often found Jon in the Godswood, hand resting on Ghost's white ruff, eyes on the heart tree. Sometimes he spoke to the face carved there. Sometimes he spoke to her of fears, of wearing a crown he never wanted, of the whispers that he was son of fire and blood, and might yet challenge Daenerys for it. She listened, and when words failed she offered merely her presence, which seemed enough. But news from the south grew darker by the day. Cersei sealed King's Landing, quartering the Golden Company within Gate of the Gods. She levied new taxes on Riverland's trade, cutting wheat shipments northward. She sent ravens filled with honey and poison to the lords of the Reach, promising knighthoods and gold if they withheld succor from the snow-kissed rebels. And she demanded, no longer asked, that Jon present himself and his bride-to-be for coronation at the Sept of Baelor under royal auspices. Jon read the letter, sealed in crimson wax, then crumpled it in his fist. She calls me traitor if I refuse. Hostage if I accept. Myrcella met his gaze across the map-strewn table. She miscalculates the North's mood. You are neither. You are a king who slew death. Let her call you what she will. Her words shrivel in the cold. Menarau. Davos grunted. But her crossbows still shoot straight. They devised plans. Secret marches through the neck, a fleet to sail the Bight and land near Maidenpool, spies to undermine Kiberon's rookery, all reliant on grain and horses, and men not yet healed. Winter, though broken, still lingered. Mud-swallowed wagons on the King's Road. Patience warred with pressure. Hearts yearned for reckoning. Minds counseled caution. In one twilight council, Bran lifted his gaze from the empty fire grate and said, "The lioness will strike first. She hunts a lever. Fear, gold, blood. Deny her lever." Jon frowned. How? By claiming what she values before her grasp closes. Bran's pale eyes fixed on Myrcella, then flicked to Jon. The meaning dawned slowly, like sunrise in deep mist. Sansa caught it next. Marriage. Crowned in the north beneath Hearttree and Weirwood, not the sept, not the throne. Myrcella's heart hammered. She looked at Jon, his eyes wide, not in fear but recognition that the path he'd feared would be forced upon him, must instead be seized by his own hand. Silence lengthened until Podrick stumbled over a log in the hearth, cursing softly. Jon spoke at last. If marriage can save lives, stop false alliances from forming, then yes. But only if Myrcella wills it. All eyes turned. She inhaled, feeling the North's chill pass her lips and settle warm in her chest. I came north to be a piece on my mother's board. I stayed to fight. Not as pawn, but knight. I will marry you, Jon Stark. Of my own will and on northern soil. Nensindawaini. The oaths were said 7 nights later before the Weirwood. Only close retainers attended. The realm would learn soon enough. But this moment belonged to them. Arya bore the cloak of House Stark. Tyrion the cloak of Lannister. Each placed their half on the couple's shoulders, knotting them together. Bran spoke words older than septs, older than maesters. Promises entwining spirit and land. Snow drifted soft as confetti. Rhaegal loosed a roar that shook icicles from branches, while Ghost sat sentinel beside the Hearttree roots. Myrcella wore a gown of simple gray wool lined with fox. Jon a doublet so black it seemed void of light, save where silver threads embroidered deerwolves across the breast. They exchanged dragonglass rings, tokens forged from the doom that had nearly ended them. When Jon kissed her, the yard seemed to exhale, as though Winterfell itself approved. Torches flared, and the pyres from the battle's dead glowed like watching ancestors. The feast lasted till dawn. Bear meat stew thick with onions to appease Arya, sour goat cheese from the Vale. Even a cask of arbor gold smuggled in a sardine barrel. Laughter rose, genuine, though sorrow sat at every elbow. Lyanna Mormont's cup remained raised but untouched. They poured the first draught onto frozen earth. As dawn's first pale threads touched the battlements, Myrcella slipped from the great hall. She crossed the yard where frost rhymed each blade of grass with diamonds. Jon stood atop the curtain wall again, as if every joy inevitably led him back to watching over those he must protect. She approached, wrapped her arms around his waist, rested her cheek between his shoulder blades. Already worrying for what comes. She chided gently. "I fear I'll always worry," he admitted. "But tonight, I fear less. That is a gift I can never repay." She stepped beside him. Together they watched the sky bloom crimson and rose. In the east clouds massed, storm fronts pushing inland from turbulent seas. Somewhere behind those clouds lay Cersei's armies sharpening swords. Somewhere roads teemed with hungry small folk, whose fate depended on the dawn these two shaped. Jon spoke without turning. "When the time comes, we ride. Wolf and lion, north and south, together." Myrcella intertwined her fingers with his. "And neither crown nor throne nor tomb shall part us." Below, Ghost lifted his muzzle. howling a note that echoed across blasted fields and smoldering pyres, over thawing rivers and budding marsh, across watchtowers where tired sentries blinked at the dawn. The song carried to those who mourned and those who plotted, to the high halls of Dragonstone and the shadowed cellars of the Red Keep, to the iron decks of ships that now swore fealty to storms yet named, spreading the news: a new union had been forged in the belly of winter, tempered by flame and blood and hope. Whether it would prove strong enough to shatter a queen's golden chains or break beneath their weight remained unwritten, hanging like dawn itself, fragile, breathtaking, and full of ruthless promise. Across the edge of the world, snow in the yard melted by slow degrees during the days that followed the wedding, as if reluctant to loosen its grip on Winterfell. Drifts shrank into pock-marked gray humps. Runnels of icy water tracked down flagstones and pooled in footprints left by soldiers drilling in the pale sunlight. Carts rolled in through the Hunter's Gate every dawn. Timber from Deepwood Motte to rebuild the granary roof. Smoked cod from White Harbor. Bundles of spear hafts from the Wolfswood. Gendry's forges roared night and day, pouring black iron into dragonglass molds Tyrion had sketched in charcoal. Each dawn Myrcella woke to the whine of grindstones under her window, the clang of hammers, and the caw of ravens bound south with letters sealed in a new sigil. Direwolf couchant before a sunburst lion. Jon allowed himself no moment's ease. The memory of the Walker's annihilation sat in his mind like a hot coal, equal parts triumph and dread. He had seen monsters once thought myths vanish in a heartbeat, and it taught him how swiftly any certainty might break. Each morning he donned leather and mail, walked the walls, listened to steward reports on oats, timber, horseflesh, wine, salt, mail links, candle stubs. Whatever detail he overlooked now would bleed men later on the King's Road. On the 7th afternoon, since the battle, he met Daenerys in the Lord's Solar. Bran had requested the conference: a king and a queen, a dragon-mounted conqueror, and a ruling lord of the North now bound to a Lannister bride. The air that day smelled of fresh sawn pine from the carpenter's scaffolds. Daenerys wore a long coat of dove-gray velvet lined in silver fox. Her hair, braided with a single strand of Rhaegal's scale, glinted in the hearth glow. Brienne stood watch by the door, a silent sentinel. Tyrion lingered at Daenerys' shoulder, Davos at Jon's. Between them, Bran sat in his wheeled chair, gaze unfocused, as if seeing something neither wall nor roof could restrain. Jon greeted his queen politely. Myrcella offered a small curtsy. Daenerys' purple eyes slid to the princess' left hand, to the dragonglass band carved in scales. A muscle tightened at her jaw, but she inclined her head. "Bran tells me you have chosen the day you ride south," she said without preamble. "We leave at first thaw," Jon replied. "Snow still chokes the neck. Another week of sun should clear the last drifts. We march by Moat Cailin, meet Lord Reed's levies, then follow the King's Road in 3 columns. And my unsullied sail from White Harbor tomorrow," Daenerys said. "Grey Worm will land at Duskendale and cut the King's Road behind Cersei's lines. If she means to trap you between trebuchets and wildfire, she'll find a dragon at her throat instead." Tyrion cleared his throat. "The city's gates are mined with alchemists' jars. If the Queen of the Ashes grows desperate—" "She will," Myrcella interjected, surprising even herself with the steel in her voice. "My mother never saw a lock she could not burn away. The more we tighten the noose, the faster she'll strike." "Good," Daenerys murmured. "Let her burn what she claims to rule. I will raise another city from the embers." Jon stiffened. "Not ash and children's bones." The fire popped behind them. Tyrion took a small step sideways, as if to place himself between royal tempers. Bran spoke, voice mild yet carrying a weight stone walls could not dampen. "Fire and blood topple kings. Seed and soil crown them. The realm tired of monsters the night the wall cracked. Rule with molten wrath, and you'll birth the monster anew." "Thou." Daenerys' fingers drummed the chair arm, then she exhaled slowly. "What, then, do you propose?" Bran looked first to Jon, then Myrcella. "A charter," he said. "Promise to the lords who ride behind us. When the throne falls, the North shall remain free beneath its own crown, yet allied by blood to the new dragon kingdom in the south." Daenerys frowned. You mean to split the realm? Bind it differently, Bran said. Not by fear of dragons, nor fear of winter, but by pact. A crown for Winterfell, a crown for King's Landing, each pledged to defend the other from foes abroad. Now, Tyrion's brows lifted. The twin crown accords, he murmured. I sketched something like it once in King's Landing. Small folk riddles about two halves of the same apple. A pretty apple carved with line of steel, Davos muttered. Cersei would toss the core into the sea afore she shared a bite. Cersei will have no say, Daenerys said. Her gaze returned to Jon, softer now. I can live beside a northern crown, if that crown kneels to none but its own people. Jon nodded. The North will not bow again, but it will stand beside you against any storm. Myrcella touched Jon's wrist. And the Stormlands? The Reach? The Vale? Will they kneel to a charter they never signed? Tyrion answered. They will, if we rescue them first. Relieve their grain debts, crush Ironborn raids, break the Golden Company's contracts by gold or blade. Free men follow strength that shelters. Daenerys' eyes glittered beneath the lamplight. Then we ride. Preparations quickened. Jon sent ravens bearing sealed letters to every bannerman between the wall and the twins. Muster at Moat Cailin by the first full moon of Leafbreak. Squires filled wagons with quarrels, hand axes, mended lamellar, sacks of barley meal. Glover's men felled tall pines to fashion longbow staves. House Karstark's charcoal pits burned round the clock, fueling forges until the very air tasted of soot. Wildling spears, whalebone tipped with obsidian, were fitted with Northmen's shields ringed in iron. Weirwood arrows, fletched with goose feathers dyed gray, piled like sheaves against the armory wall. On a sleet-bitten morning, Tyrion met Jaime in the stable yard. The Kingslayer's left hand never left the pommel of his sword these days, a reflex born of too many cold looks from men whose brothers had died to Lannister gold. Yet the northern smiths had filed a direwolf into the crossguard of his weapon. The gesture meant more than words could. Tyrion craned to see the emblem, then smiled crookedly. A lion wearing a wolfskin, he quipped. Mother would hate it. Jaime's answering smile barely lifted one corner of his mouth. We'll give her a matching pair soon enough. Tyrion shifted onto tiptoe to pat his brother's steel-clad forearm. Our sister stockpiles wildfire beneath the guild halls. Qyburn's whisperers report 4,000 clay pots by now. If she lights even half, then I'll quench them, Jaime said. He glanced to where Brienne supervised squires bridling destriers. The tall woman's blonde hair blew dark with damp. Last time I drowned wildfire with rivers of blood at my feet. This time, I'll use an army. Try water, it stains less, Tyrion muttered. But his jest fell flat. Jaime's gaze had tightened into that faraway focus soldiers wear before a charge. The eve of departure arrived beneath a bruised sky. In the Godswood, the weirwood's red leaves shuddered under a restless wind, as though the heart tree already felt the weight of the vows whispered in its shadow. Jon knelt before the ancient face one last time, Ghost beside him, Myrcella half a step behind. Her gloveless palm rested on the crown of his shoulder, steady as the hush among the boughs. You guarded my home when I was lost, Jon murmured to the carved visage. Now guard it again, I beg. Watch over those who cannot follow where war leads. He pressed 2 fingers to the bleeding bark, then stood. Myrcella studied the face, eyes weeping red sap, mouth parted in an unheard prayer. She had grown to find comfort here, though the tree whispered in a tongue she could not grasp. Keep him, she said softly. Keep us both. They walked from the Godswood into a yard alive with torchlight, and the scents of boiled oats and horse sweat. Lines of cavalry waited by the open gate. Manderly banners, tall spearmen of House Serwyn, wildling-mounted scouts with axes strapped to backs. Giant hounds barked, tin cups clattered. Far over the battlements, Rhaegal's silhouette glided, a pale green star against lowering clouds. In the hall fire flared round the long hearths. Sansa stood by the high table, cloak already pinned, ready to ride southwest with a detachment toward the twins. Her task to win Lord Frey's fractious heirs, or break them so the army's rear would not bleed. Arya prepared to scout ahead with the Brotherhood without banners. Gendry had forged her a folded steel stiletto no blade could turn. Bran remained behind, the last Stark in Winterfell, sentinel in the tangled labyrinth of past and future. He called Jon and Myrcella to him. "Paths converge," he said in a voice older than winter. "I have seen two thrones, one melting beneath dragonfire, another drowning in a river of gold. But there is a third path, narrower than a razor's edge. Walk it true, and the realm survives." "Give me a map, little brother," Jon replied, laying a hand on Bran's slender shoulder. "I will follow." Bran's pale lips curved the ghost of a smile. "The map grows with each step." It was the closest thing to blessing they would receive. The march south began under a sky the color of unburnished steel. Thousands funneled over the bridge at the White Knife, hooves ringing on ice-glazed planks. Children clung to hay wains, wool cloaks too large for skinny frames. Women paced beside oxen, cradling swaddled babes. The nobility rode to either side, shielding the column's flanks like iron bones. At night they camped within ring walls of wagons, fires banked low to hide their glow. Scouts returned with news of bandits wearing half-melted armor of fallen Lannister hosts. The hunger winter left behind had bred desperation along every hedgerow. East of the King's Road, Lord Reed's crannogmen met them. Small, dark men in marsh-print cloaks, boots of waterproof leather. They guided the trains through fetid bogs where will-o'-wisps danced. Myrcella breathed brackish air and listened to frogs croak under starlight, grateful for leech boots Sansa had insisted she wear. The marshland seemed to swallow hoofbeats. Only the bob of lanterns at the mastheads of reed raft barges betrayed the path. On the sixth night, the vanguard reached the stone causeway at Moat Cailin. Towers lay in shattered ruin, their basalt blocks crusted white by lichen. In one courtyard, Northmen heaped broken iron, spoils from the walkers' wights. Jon ordered the pile melted into arrowheads. Nothing forged in that night's terror would bear arms for the south. As dawn broke, Myrcella descended to the dark pool beneath the drunkard's tower. Said to be bottomless, she tossed a single copper star, Lannister stamp, long-worn blank. The coin plinked, rippled, vanished. She whispered, "For the price of silence," recalling her mother's lesson. Secrets were always bought. Here she meant to sell one of her own. Her fear of facing the woman who birthed her. The pool swallowed it, gave no change. Past Moat Cailin the land widened into rolling heather. Spring's reluctant fingers coaxed tender green shoots from black earth. Wild orchids lifted purple tongues to the sun. The army marched in 3 columns as planned. Left wing under Lord Manderley, right under Lady Serwyn, center beneath Yon's black wolf banner. Above, Rhaegal's sword, and with him, fresh from Pike where the Iron Islands had cast out Euron's madness, Yara Greyjoy's longships patrolled the western coast, ready to harry any Lannister supply barge hugging shore. At Seaguard, Lord Jason Mallister welcomed them into high-walled courtyards, where seabirds shrieked overhead. His men lugged barrels of salt cod, but the air carried uneasy whispers. Ravens out of the Vale spoke of Cersei's envoys, offering Lord Royce gold shipments, and the handship once king's landing fell. Royce sent no reply. Still, the seed of suspicion sprouted. Jon spent a night in council with the silver-haired lord. Myrcella sat silent at his right, hands folded. When Royce's maester produced the letter bearing Cersei's seal, Myrcella recognized the looping script as Qyburn's. She slid a scribbled note across the table in reply. "The spider's web glitters brightest before the dew dries." Royce pondered, then laid the letter on the brazier and watched it curl into ash. South of the Trident, farmland spread like a patchwork quilt, draped over gentle folds. Here winter's touch seemed lighter. Cherry trees already bloomed. Scattering petals that dusted the helms of marching men in pink confetti. Villagers lined the lanes, timid at first, then bold enough to wave. They'd heard tales of blue-eyed devils crashing like surf against northern walls, and of the Wolf King who killed death itself. Now they saw him on a smoky gray courser. His wife at his side clad in mail too large for court but perfect for war. And they knelt. Some offered baskets of onions, sacks of rye, wheels of white cheese. Sir Davos rode his horse ragged, hauling half back to feed the vanguard scouts. Near Maidenpool, they met Bronn of the Blackwater, Tyrion's sellsword friend, leading 300 mercenaries whose contracts with Lannister gold had lapsed when Casterly Rock's mines quit yielding. He swaggered into camp one dusk. Helm under arm, announced he'd follow whichever banner paid in promises he believed. Tyrion poured him wine, spoke a while beneath Jon's eye. At dawn, Bronn's men filed into the northern ranks, and the king's quartermaster scratched a note. Pay, 1 tower on the Trident, 1 minor lady of uncertain lineage, plus grazing rights for 20 years. Myrcella suspected Tyrion had purchased the man's loyalty with a greater coin, perhaps patience, the rarest of currencies. On the 15th day, after leaving Winterfell, the host reached the rolling downs north of Harrenhal. The black ruins clawed the clouds, melted towers like wax candles half burnt. Campfires dotted the fields below, a forest of flickering stars. Daenerys unsullied, arrived by forced marches. Grey Worm greeted Jon with a nod, but his eyes flicked to Myrcella, reading lion where others saw queen. She matched his regard with steady calm. Once, slave soldiers had bowed to her father's throne. Now they served a breaker of chains. Respect must be earned anew. That night at council beneath a pavilion sewn of patched silk, Daenerys unfurled a map inked with Corthry cartographer marks. Cersei's Golden Company holds the Tumblestone Crossing, she said. 50 elephants, 8,000 pikes, 4,000 archers. They've dug trenches along the north bank, with Scorpio beds behind palisades. Jon traced the river line. If we storm, we bleed half our strength before King's Landing. Tyrion tapped the page. There's a ferry port here, 2 leagues east. A wooded marsh on our side conceals the shore. We could row across at night with 3,000 light foot. 3,000 is not 8, Grey Worm said. No, Tyrion agreed. But 3,000 behind their lines at dawn might convince the company their contract's coin has devalued. Daenerys looked to Myrcella. What say the daughter of the lion? Will sellswords bend if the girl they swore against stands before them under truce? Myrcella's tongue felt wooden, yet she spoke. The Golden Company prides itself on broken men and bastard princes. Show them a princess born to a mother who would burn them for delay, and they may change sides to spite her. But they'll want proof she cannot reward them if they refuse. Tyrion smiled thin. Proof is my craft. They agreed. In 2 nights' time, a diversion by Rhaegal would draw the company's gaze skyward, while small boats slipped across the Tumblestone. 10 men commanded by Brienne would escort Myrcella dressed in crimson mantle. Tyrion would ride at her side with a satchel of writs promising the company pardons, titles, coins seized from the crown steps of Baelor. Jon would lead the main assault once the elephants turned to face their new enemy in the rear. The night before the river, crossing the air hung heavy with the scent of mud and bluebell. Myrcella lay in a canvas tent pitched between Jon's command pavilion and a circle of wildling cookfires. She should have slept, but sleep shunned eyes that saw only her mother's face behind every flicker of lamplight. Cersei smiled when she learned Myrcella's role in the company's defection. Would it be fury, or pride at a game well played, or heartbreak hidden behind iron? Outside, faint lute strings drifted. Podrick playing some forlorn tune had learned in a Braavosi tavern, all minor chords and stretched silences. Myrcella rose, pulled a cloak around shift and mail both, and stepped into the cool gloom. Horses muttered in picket lines. Forges hissed, tempering edges late into night. She found Jon standing alone at the riverbank, moonlight turning his hair silver. Ghost dozed in tall reeds nearby, breath a soft rumble. Jon did not turn but spoke as she approached. Tomorrow you gamble with sellswords who bend easier to coin than conscience. She stood beside him. Better coin than flame. I will wager Lannister gold to buy Stark lives. Jon's hand found hers, cold steel brushing warm skin. If the company refuses, signal me. Rhaegal will break their line and scorch my escort. Brienne won't allow that, he said, half a smile. Then his voice dropped. When you stand before them, remember, no matter your name, you speak for the fate of thousands. Fear their arrows, but do not fear the men who hold them. I fear only becoming her, Myrcella whispered. If I must threaten blood to win them, I risk wearing my mother's claws. Jon turned fully. Moonlight traced scar and stubble in the curve of his brow. Your mother's claws are gilded. Yours are tempered steel. The difference is whether you use them to grip or to gouge. She leaned into his chest. He smelled of pine smoke and river water. Hold me, she said. He did, until clouds swallowed the moon. Dawn came bleeding red. Mist clung to the tumblestone like ghost silk. 3 lanterns blinked from the main shore. Brienne's signal. Myrcella boarded the narrow barge first. Crimson cloak wrapped tight. Hood thrown back so any spyglass across the water would see Lannister gold hair gleaming. Tyrion followed. Satchel clinking. 10 stalwart shield sisters from Bear Island manned oars, faces streaked with swamp mud. Brienne braced at the prow, long sword sheathed but readiness coiled in her stance. Mid-channel the river flowed sluggish, thick as broth. A heron flapped overhead. Somewhere a frog croaked thrice. On the far bank, palisades stood dark and silent. No horns yet, no pikes gleaming. Myrcella's skin prickled beneath mail. Suddenly the eastern sky tore with dragon roar. Rhaegal swooped low over treetops, wings beating thunder. At the palisade torches flared, men shouted. A flight of crossbow bolts streaked upward, clattering uselessly off scale. The dragon wheeled, belching emerald fire at empty air, a show to draw every eye. The barge slipped into reeds 20 yards downstream of the palisade. Splintered boats lay half-sunken there, relics of some old mill. Brienne leapt first, ankle deep in water, sword whispering free. Myrcella followed, Tyrion last, wading through mud up to his calves, muttering obscenities about swamp leeches. They stole through willow thickets until the camp unfolded ahead. Rows of striped tents, elephants in chain caparisons, rattling banners of black and gold with the banded tiger. Near the river, a raised platform held the company's pay chests, iron-banded, guarded by crossbowmen facing the water in case of river assault. Those sentries now craned their necks skyward, watching Rhaegal swirl like a storm god. Brienne tapped Myrcella's arm. They ran, boots soft on damp earth. At 20 paces she called out in high Valyrian, words taught her once by a Braavosi master to signal parley. The nearest guard spun, eyes wide. He beckoned uncertain. By the time more crossbows turned on them, Myrcella and her escort had crossed the open ground. Within the command pavilion, Captain General Harry Strickland stood in mirror-polished breastplate, a map table before him, trumpeters rushing to station. He looked up, stunned to see a royal princess stride into the tent where dragons hammered overhead. Myrcella threw back her hood. "Captain General," she said in clipped yet ringing tones, "I bring you word from King John of the North and Queen Daenerys Stormborn." Strickland's mouth pinched. "Your mother pays our wages, girl." "Your mother," Tyrion cut in cheerily, "promises wages. Promises require coffers." He dumped the satchel. Gold coins stamped with twin lion heads spilled like sunlight. Murmurs rippled through gathered captains. "These are only the first fists of many," Tyrion went on. "Casterly Rock's treasuries now answer to the north. Seize this chance and you'll feast. Stand against us and you'll dine with ashes." Strickland snorted. "Threats from a dwarf, bribes from a traitor. Did you bring jugglers too?" "Only honesty," Myrcella said. She stepped closer. "I am no traitor. I am the future queen of the North, married to the king who ended the long night. My mother would have sacrificed your company to burn that king. I offer you survival." "Survival?" Strickland scoffed. "With half a realm already scorched by ice and fire?" Myrcella lifted her chin. "We rebuild. We pay. We keep men whole for their next wars. You sold swords first to Aegon Blackfire, then to Cersei. Sell now to tomorrow, not yesterday." Menderwane. A hush settled. Outside, trumpets blared as Rhaegal's shadow passed again. Strickland eyed Brienne's bloody blade. The Bear Island women behind her, like avenging furies. Coins glimmered at his feet. He inhaled. If we lay down arms, Cersei kills our kin hostage in Lannisport. Would you have our families roast for your northern snow? Tyrion's smile faded. Your families sailed months past. My sister claimed them hostages, yes. But word arrived 3 days ago. They boarded Euron's fleet west. That fleet burned off Fair Isle under Yara Greyjoy. Survivors were carried to Bear Island. Safe, fed, waiting. Dum? Strickland's eyes widened, calculation flickering. Tyrion tossed a parchment seal of House Greyjoy bearing the squid sigil. Their freedom costs one thing. Your pledge. Brienne stepped forward. Choose now. Steel scraped as captains drew swords. First in defiance. Then reversed, points lowered. Strickland's blade rested last. He bowed, crisp. The Golden Company stands for golden glory, he said. Today, glory walks in wolfskin. We follow. The sun had barely tipped noon when Jon's central host crested the ridge to see the enemy camp dissolve. Elephants lumbered south, banners now dipped in salute. A cheer coursed along the northern spears. Jon raised his helm, squinting at the sight. Myrcella riding beside Strickland, cloak streaming scarlet. Relief slammed through him so fierce his knees threatened to buckle. Ghost howled. Rhaegal banked overhead and roared approval. By dusk both armies bivouacked on opposite banks of the Tumblestone. Now allies. Fires dotted the shore. Cooks traded spice for onion. And in the officers' circle Myrcella stood at Jon's side while Tyrion toasted with a wineskin bigger than his head. To Sel's words, he declared, proof that any villain may yet be redeemed for the proper fee, or the proper lie. No one laughed harder than Bronn. News of the company's defection galloped ahead on wings of sparrow rumor. In King's Landing, Qyburn's whisperers hissed of a princess risen from snowbound tombs, promising mercy to those who bent. Cersei received the tidings in her solar. She dismissed the messenger, walked to the window overlooking the Blackwater. Daylight painted the river bronze. Her fingers closed around the stem of a jeweled goblet, knuckles whitening. Myrcella. She breathed, the name half wound, half plea. She thought of a little girl chasing cats through the Red Keep's courtyards, golden hair streaming, laughter pure. She pictured that child now riding with enemies wearing stark gray. Her throat tightened. Something inside her cracked, but the fissure filled swiftly with molten fury. She turned, ready the scorpions, double the guard at every gate, and summon Euron Greyjoy. She stared westward, where the sun sank behind walls. If my daughter comes home, she'll find the door barred by fire. The march pressed on. At Sow's Horn the army split. Daenerys crossed the Blackwater by ship with the Unsullied to assault the city's seaward walls. Jon led ground forces to encircle the landward gates. Myrcella remained with him. Daenerys insisted Rhaegal could bear her to safety if wildfire lit the city. But Jon refused separation. They argued beneath a sky streaked with gulls until Bran's counsel echoed between them. The third path. Finally they compromised. Myrcella would ride in sight of Rhaegal's patrols, but within Jon's vanguard. Narrow valleys forced single file down the Roserad. Scouts returned with reports of fresh pits dug across the approach fields, traps for cavalry. Jon sent wildling outriders to flank through hillside goat tracks. 2 nights later, those same riders returned herding 50 prisoners. King's Landing peasants forced to labor on the pits. They spoke of Qyburn's black-cloaked alchemists storing jars beneath septs, cellars, even orphanages. Myrcella's stomach twisted. Each storehouse bore a single sigil. The hand of the king. We must strike before she lights them, Jon said. Gaze distant. Daenerys agreed. Rhaegal would torch the granaries outside the walls at dawn. The smoke would hide unsullied bridging boats crossing to the Mudgate. At the Lion Gate, Jon's sappers would flood the tunnels, softening mortar, then charge. That night Jon and Myrcella shared a small officer's tent, pitched on a hillside dotted in heather. Rain drummed on oiled canvas. They lay on blankets, armor stacked by the entrance, Ghost curled at their feet, ribs still bandaged. Neither slept. Lightning flashed distant, illuminating the canopy's seams. "I once dreamed of King's Landing," Jon murmured. "When I was still on the wall. I thought if I reached it, I'd find answers to questions I didn't yet know. Now I know the questions, and the city's answers are all blood." Myrcella traced the scar on his chest, the one left by a spear for which she had no answer. "Blood washes," she said. "Enough water and it fades." "Not from stone," Jon replied. "So we burn the stone clean." He turned to face her, eyes dark and fathomless. "No. We burn only what we must. We build after." She kissed the hollow at his collarbone. "Then promise me something. When the city falls, we keep the children safe first. Even if the streets run around us." "I promise." The words tasted like iron. Dawn unfurled like torn silk. Gray, sullen, restless. Smoke billowed where Rhaegal's fire swept through the outer granaries. Casks exploded like thunder. Unsullied boats slid through fog. Shields raised. They crashed into the mudgate's pilings. On the landward side, scorpion bolts whistled from parapets, clattering against raised mantlets. The earth shook as rams smashed the lion gate. Myrcella rode at Jon's right, Strickland's elephants ahead battering palisades. The trunk of one beast swung, hurling a burning wagon aside. A pot of pitch arced from the wall, bursting across the creature's flank. It screamed, reared, trampled two pikemen from the gold cloaks defending the gate. Jon surged forward, long claw severing pike hafts. Myrcella parried a halberd, riposte driving point under mail ring. Blood sprayed her gloves. Hot, yet different from the gore she'd stanched in Winterfell. This blood belonged to men sworn once to protect her. She blinked back tears, forced mercy to the back of her throat. Thrust again. The lion gate gave. Chains snapped. Hinges groaned. Portcullis sagged into dust. Northern infantry poured through. Myrcella followed, breath ragged inside visor. Immediately the stench of burning tallow and sewage hit. Shrieks rose. Steel upon steel, crossbow bolts slashing like hornets. Street fights fragmented into pockets. Brienne waded ahead. Shield raised, Jaime at her side deflecting blows with gold hand like battering ram. Tyrion ducked beneath a cart, flinging small knives into kneecaps. Davos bellowed orders, shepherding civilians out of crossfire. Children scurried, some clutching bread, others dragging younger siblings. Myrcella threw open shop doors, shouting for non-combatants to flee behind northern lines. One old man spat at her lion crest. Endured it. Near the street of flour a tremor shuddered the ground. Wildfire jar exploding beneath a scribed stall. Green flames roared upward, devouring awnings, crawling like liquid spider along gutters. Smoke stung eyes. Jon cursed, waved men back. But a second blast erupted further south. Then a third, nearer the Red Keep. "She's lighting them," Myrcella gasped. Jon's face hardened. "To the sept," he ordered. "Cersei stores wildfire beneath the great sept of Baelor still. If she ignites it, half the city." A horn call carried from the wharf. Greyjoy ships inside the harbor, launching firepots toward the city walls, meant to spread chaos. Yara's fleet returned volley. Above, Rhaegal swooped, his roar drowned by screams. Unsullied banners advanced down the Street of Sisters, pressing gold cloaks back toward the Gate of the Gods. Jon spun to Davos. "Find the Alchemist's Hall. Flood it." To Brienne. "Hold this junction. Nothing passes north." He gripped Myrcella's hand. "Come. There's one who can stop her madness." They ran, cutting through alleyways, past burning houses, through smoke so thick eyes wept. Ghost looked ahead, snarling at falling timbers. In a cloistered yard near the Sept of the Faith militant, they found Sandor Clegane dragging a bleeding Euron Greyjoy by the collar. The hound dropped the Kraken Lord at Jon's feet. "Found this pissreek prancing by the dragon pit. Thought you might like your dog leashed." Euron coughed, laughter bubbling. The lion bitch waits in her tower with a jar in each hand, he croaked. Go save her, wolf. But mind the bite. Jon left him to Clegane, pressing onward to the Red Keep. Lanes twisted, choking with rubble from earlier blasts. The closer they came, the thicker flames licked palace walls. At last they reached Maegor's hold-fast gate. Gold cloaks lay dead outside, throats slit by unseen blades. Arya's work, no doubt. Inside the yard, Qyburn knelt beside a fallen scorpion, adjusting a counterweight. He looked up. Spectacles cracked. Too late, your grace, he said softly. The queen lights the city. Jon leveled Longclaw. Stand aside. She placed wildfire beneath the throne room itself, a pyre to burn all oaths broken. Qyburn's smile was tinged with melancholy. Science bows to purpose, and hers is absolute. A roar split the sky. Rhaegal descended into the yard, gates splintering under downthrust wind. Green fire glimmered in his throat. Daenerys atop the saddle, eyes blazing. Myrcella stepped forward, voice ragged. Archmaester, where is she? Qyburn's gaze flicked to the Tower of the Hand, the same balcony she watched her children play below. Myrcella ran. She climbed spirals she once chased kittens on, heart hammering. Smoke seeped through arrow slits, emerald light dancing on walls. At last, she burst onto the queen's terrace. Cersei stood alone by the stone balustrade, a jar of wildfire in each arm like twin infants. Her golden hair clung wet to her cheeks, eyes rimmed red. Myrcella, she whispered, voice breaking with unshed sob. You've come home. Mother, Myrcella said, cold wind whipping her cloak. Stop this. Cersei's gaze flicked to the courtyard where Jon and Daenerys now argued. Dragon wings churned air. They took you, twisted you. No, Myrcella said, stepping closer, palms raised. I found myself. Cersei laughed, brittle. Listen to her, Jaime's sweet girl. Tears glinted but did not fall. Give me your hand, daughter. We'll leave this world together, burn all our enemies to ash, and in the next life your brothers play in meadows again. Myrcella's throat tightened. She remembered Tommen's shy smile, Joffrey's shrill laugh before cruelty hardened it. Let go of the jars, she whispered. Come with me. Wind gusted, snuffing torches. Distant thuds echoed. Rams at the castle gate. Cersei looked over her shoulder at the throne room's shattered window. Through it dawn light streamed, igniting motes of dust. I no longer know the way out. Myrcella stepped closer. 10 feet, 8, Torrawal. Cersei lifted one jar, fingers white. Another step, and King's Landing ends. Myrcella halted, tears hot. I never wished this war. I did, Cersei said, lips trembling. Because war ends fear. She looked down at the swirling green liquid. When all burns, nothing is left to fear. You fear losing us, Myrcella whispered. But you already lost me the day you chose fire over hope. Cersei flinched. The jar quivered. Below, Jon shouted. Daenerys cried Dracarys. Myrcella held her mother's gaze. Choose hope, mother. Please. Cersei's face crumpled. Girlhood sorrow beneath iron mask. She lowered the jar an inch. A crossbow twanged. Bolt whizzed past Myrcella, thumped into Cersei's shoulder. She staggered, jar slipping from grasp, tumbling. Myrcella lunged, caught her mother's wrist. Pain exploded as glass cracked, green liquid misting. Myrcella ripped the jar free, hurled it over the battlements. It burst mid-air, a flower of jade even as Rhaegal banked wide to douse with water from the fountain roof. Cersei collapsed, blood pumping from the wound. Myrcella cradled her, tears streaking soot. Hold on, she choked. Cersei's eyes fluttered. Your hair shines. She breathed. Like mine once. Feet thundered up the stair. Jaime, clutching dagger, eyes wild. He skidded to knees, pressed cloth to wound. Stay, sister, Stay. But life seeped out. Red and warm. Cersei's hand lifted, brushed Myrcella's cheek, then fell. One breath exhaled, and no more. Silence. Save thunder of distant war. Myrcella wept. Jaime wrapped arms around both, rocking. Below, bells tolled. A single peal. Then another. The city surrendered. Days later, smoke still curled from charred districts. Smoldering debris floated down the Blackwater like funeral petals. Yet life stirred. Bakers reopening stalls, sept bells calling for prayer. Children fishing fire-gutted alleyways for coins fused in heat. On the great sept steps, Myrcella stood beside Jon while Daenerys addressed the gathered throng, promising charters and wheat silos and justice with tempered sword. Inside the throne room, the Iron Throne had melted where wildfire kissed dragon flame. Twisted stumps of swords fused to slag. Daenerys surveyed the ruin, then turned away. "We build anew," she declared. Tyrion drafted plans for a council chamber in place of the throne. Round, no head, no tail. That night, in Tommen's old solar overlooking the city, Jon and Myrcella spoke alone. Moonlight played through broken shutters. "Tomorrow they crown me Queen of the North in the Dragon's Courtyard," she said. "And me Protector of the Realm, until councils choose their shape," Jon added. He brushed a lock of hair from her brow. Heavy titles. Lighter than wildfire. He kissed her then. Soft, unhurried. "We have cut the third path, you and I. Bran was right. We only began it." She replied. "The rest of the walk lies ahead." They stood at the window, hands entwined, and watched dawn bloom over a city still smoking yet alive. Streets glinting with wet ash, spires silhouetted against the new sun, roofs where pigeons scared by war settled again. Somewhere, a rooster crowed. Bells chimed, mournful yet hopeful, marking an hour unclaimed by any tyrant. The sound spread across rooftops, bounced between statues, flowed through open gates where refugees returned. It reached the camps outside the walls where northern soldiers shouldered packs for the ride home, and the harbor where ships unfurled pale sails for distant coasts, and the smoky barracks where unsullied stacked spears, and asked at last what life meant with no chains to hold. For a moment longer Jon and Myrcella watched in silence, letting the weight of what they'd won settle upon their shoulders. Then they turned together from the window, toward the hall where plans awaited, treaties unwritten, wounds unhealed, toward the map that would grow beneath their feet with each step they took, not as lion nor wolf but as something forged of both, a promise tempered by winter, lit by fire, carried forward by the fragile, fearless hope of spring's first dawn. The morning of Myrcella's northern coronation arrived in a hush of pearlescent mist, the kind that blurred boundary between river and sky, until ships seemed to glide upon clouds. Though King's Landing stirred beyond the Red Keep's ramparts, vendors unshuttering stalls, sparrows sweeping broken tiles from the sept's periphery. Within the palace courtyards a subdued expectancy reigned. Builders had cleared most of the fallen masonry, but charred beams still jutted like rib bones from half-collapsed wings. Red carp drifts caught in stagnant pools left by firefighting pumps. Amid this somber tableau, an improvised dais of fresh-sawn cedar had been erected atop the blasted courtyard paving. No silk awning or brazier lent color, only a standard of direwolf and lion entwined, stitched overnight by Lady Cerwyn's needlewomen, rippled in a listless breeze. Jon dressed in silence. Arya fastened the wolf head clasp at his collar, Valyrian steel carved from a spur of Longclaw's tang, while Ghost sat on haunches nearby, scarred ears twitching at distant hammer blows. The king had slept scarcely 2 hours, mind gnawed by questions that would not wait for dawn. How many grain barges sailed up the Mander each day? How badly Old Town's merchants would resist wartime levies? Whether Gendry's dragonglass reserves could be remolded into plowshares by autumn? Such worries clung to him like a damp second tunic. Yet when Arya stepped back and regarded him with a look that mixed mischief and pride, he managed to smile. "You still hate these ceremonies?" she said. "Hate is strong," he replied. "I merely prefer the part where we put down swords much shorter." Arya's grin flashed wolfish. Then remember a trick Sirio taught me. Imagine every lord in the yard is naked as the day they were born. Hard to fear a man when you can count his goose flesh." Jon chuckled despite himself. "I'll try." They descended flights of stairs, scoured clean of soot. In a lesser corridor they met Sansa, draped in slate blue wool and fox fur. The hue matched her eyes, but the set of her shoulders bespoke restless weight. She carried a lacquered casket carved with the ancient runes of the first men. Its clasp bore fresh scratches, a sign she had opened and closed it repeatedly through the night, as if reassurance lay within. Ghost padded to her side and nosed the hem of her cloak. She touched his head absently, offered Jon the faintest tilt of her chin. "Is she ready?" he asked. "She has been since Winterfell," Sansa replied, though her hands shook while I braided her hair. "She will not show it." They moved on together. In the high chamber once used for royal audiences, roof now a lattice of charred beams open to pale sky, Myrcella waited. Her gown was neither silk nor samite, but undyed northern wool, combed to a sheen softer than velvet. A mantle of white weasel fur rested upon her shoulders, secured by a silver and jet clasp, set with 3 small sapphires, the color of the trident where Sansa first sang northern songs to her. Her hair, long since darkened by scant sunlight, had been plaited into a single braid, interlaced with a thin cord of black leather, the same leather stripped from a dragonglass scabbard she had carried into battle. She looked at Jon when he entered, and their gaze met like a quiet vow renewed. Across the room stood few witnesses. Tyrion, in dark doublet, chewed the side of his thumb, eyes alert beneath lids swollen from too little sleep. Davos, wearing new Maester Grey but still smelling faintly of tar and onion, rubbed the polished stump where Knuckles once lived. Brienne waited near the arch, palm on hilt, and Bran, cloaked in raven black, occupied a carven chair drawn by Podrick's careful hands. No more than a dozen souls, yet the air felt thick as the pack's small folk throngs beyond the inner gate. Sansa stepped forward, opening her casket. She withdrew a slender circlet of interwoven weirwood and steel, wrought by armorer and carver together. White wood gleamed like bone between dark ripples of metal. She offered it to Jon. He took the circlet, felt the surprisingly light weight, then turned to Myrcella. His voice carried though he pitched it softly. "By the will of the northern lords, by trials endured through winter and war, and by the blood shed to safeguard both hearth and honor, I name you Myrcella Stark, wife, shield, and sovereign for the north beside me." Myrcella lowered her head. Jon set the circlet upon her brow. The wood seemed to mold to shape, leaves flush against gold hair. When she raised her face again, a hush followed, as if the courtyard listened through cracked stone. Few titles existed for such a role. Queen Consort implied secondary station. Queen Regnant overshadowed her husband's mantle. Queen of the North alone felt incomplete when the realm now shared leadership between crowns. So Bran spoke, voice echoing in the beam-scarred chamber. "Let her be called Wolf Lion Queen, sworn to hold the peace forged between winter and summers past, to guard the rivers that feed both halves of a broken kingdom, and to serve the living against the shadows of old night." The phrase took root. Later poets would polish it into verse, but in that dawn it rang plain and sure. Myrcella inclined her head to Bran, then extended a hand to Jon. He clasped it, their fingers interlacing, a silent answer to the vow etched in bark of Winterfell's heart tree. Outside the chamber, horns blew thrice. The couple emerged onto the cedar dais, flanked by Sansa and Tyrion. A sea of soldiers, small folk and foreign allies filled the fractured court. Northern spears bristled beside unsullied shields, Dothraki braids, Reachman tartan cloaks, even Stormlander banners bearing crowned stag and fiery dragon newly joined. Sunlight speared through the haze, illuminating drifting ash like motes of gold. Ghost ranged ahead, tail raised. Cheers rolled unevenly at first, uncertain how to greet two monarchs where once one tyrant reigned. Then Manderly's booming voice cut the morning. "Honor the Wolf Lion Queen!" The cry caught, multiplied. Spears thumped shields. Dragons roared overhead. Myrcella's cheeks flushed, but she held her head steady, scanning faces both awed and skeptical. In that tapestry of upturned gazes she glimpsed the work still ahead. To feed them, heal them, earn them. Jon raised a hand, and the noise subsided. "Today we bind our wounds," he said, tone edged with gravel. "Stone will mend, but hearts mend slower. We will not rule by fear. We will rule by the pledge that every hungry child will find bread, every orphan of this war a bed, every broken sword a plowshare before next harvest." "Da!" Somewhere near the rear a woman's voice cried, "Bread first, banners later." Laughter rippled. Tension eased like summer thaw. Jon inclined his head to the unseen speaker. "Bread is promised. Banners may remain lowered until trust stands taller than walls." He gestured to Myrcella. "She carries gold, not to gild towers, but to plant seed. The rock's coffers, open to fields never sown. Judge what blooms, and call us just or false by the fruit." "Da!" Murmurs greeted that vow. Myrcella stepped forward. "I wore lion's skin from birth, but wolves showed me how to survive winter. Now both halves live in me. I promise neither half will devour the other." She let the words fall without flourish. They sank deep. Plain speech traveled farthest across broken ground. After ceremony, the couple walked the city. No triumphal parade, only a slow circuit, accompanied by a score of mixed guards. They stopped at a soup line outside the Buckwell gate, ladled broth for ragged families. Myrcella passed her fur mantle to a cough-racked boy. His mother wept, pressing filthy knuckles to her lips. At the Street of Looms, they inspected weavers patching tents for the infirmary encampments. Jon knelt to test warp and weft, speaking with the master about linen quotas. Autumn loomed shorter than optimism. By late afternoon they turned toward the Dragon Pit, where Daenerys had summoned a war council. The pit lay half rebuilt, stone arches remortared, scorch marks scrubbed, carcasses of Qyburn scorpions stacked like ox bones by the entrance. Within, Rhaegal rested astride broken pillars, eyelids hooded but nostrils flexing at every unfamiliar scent. Unsullied ringed the perimeter. Bronze sellswards lounged nearer the gates comparing spoils. Daenerys stood at a sand table marked with pebbles. Grey Worm and Missandei consulted ledgers. Gendry and Yara argued over dry dock timetables. When Jon and Myrcella approached, conversation lapsed. "Reports from Dorne," Grey Worm said, passing Daenerys a scroll. "Prince Coran pledges spears, asks only restoration of lands annexed by Lannisters." "Grant them," Jon said before Daenerys spoke. She eyed him but nodded. Yara slapped a dagger hilt against her palm. Ironborn raiders still plagued the Shield Islands. "They fly Euron's ragged kraken. Give me leave to hunt them." Daenerys replied, "Take 3 dragons." Yara blinked. "I'll settle for 30 ships and the boy Smith scorpions." Gendry puffed his cheeks but shrugged. Tyrion hoisted himself onto a shattered column. "Logistics aside, we must craft governance. A single throne is melted. Good. Thrones invite climbing. Yet, rule cannot remain a stew of war councils." He jerked thumb at Jon. "Hay holds northern crown." She motioned to Daenerys, commands dragons and fleet. Southern houses will demand voice. Sansa stepped from shadows. A council of thrones, each region electing its own lord or lady to sit for a term. Rotating primacy. Tyrion spread his hands. "Better than the wheel we broke spinning again." "Still, some will balk at losing hereditary right." "Let them," Myrcella said. "They kept the right and lost the realm." Daenerys' gaze drifted toward melted iron throne fragments piled on a cart. "Let it be forged anew into council chairs. 7 seats. 8. Jon corrected. "North keeps independence." Daenerys smiled wryly. 8. "Aye." She met Myrcella's eyes. "Will your mother's loyalists accept a council born of her ashes?" Myrcella inhaled, steady. "Some will cling to ghosts. Others will taste bread in open fist." "Then bread first," Daenerys agreed. She pressed palm flat to the sand table. "We send riders to Highgarden, ravens to Old Town, ships to Dorne and Pike, not to demand fealty, to deliver grain and masons. When walls rebuild, hearts may follow. That decree closed the day's business. Yet when the council dispersed, Daenerys beckoned Jon aside. Rhaegal's shadow fell over them as evening sun angled low. "He senses your bond," she said, stroking a scale ridged as basalt. "A dragon knows the blood that wakes him. You may ride again." Jon glanced at the beast, felt old awe stir with dread. "Winter weights my shoulders. Flight tempts, escape. Mendem Samhain. A king may rise into sky without fleeing ground," she replied. "Look down from Dragonback. You'll see roads to mend." He did not answer. But later, when dusk smoked the rooftops lavender, Rhaegal launched over the city with 2 riders. Daenerys on his neck, Jon behind the saddle loops, hands gripping bone spines. Myrcella watched from the tower of the hand balcony, cloaks snapping. Rhaegal climbed until the black water wound below like a silver eel, then banked north. From that height, the fires of smoldering districts glimmered feebly against sprawl. The ruined Sept's marble dome looked like an eggshell cracked in two. Jon felt sorrow but also possibility. Scar more than scab, yet scab more than open wound. And he realized the labor ahead would not be forging crowns of iron but weaving wounds into seams that might hold. Through the swelter of early summer, they labored. Gendry's forges, melted scorpion limbs and iron throne blades alike, recasting them into nails, hinges, plowshares. Unsullied engineers dredged canals to sluice filthy streets, while Dothraki herders coaxed elephants to haul rubble to the sea. Ships from White Harbor arrived weekly stacked with salted cod. Dornish caravans rumbled in bearing kegs of orange wine and sacks of barley. The Reach withheld wheat until a joint envoy, Lady Sam Tarly, clad in maester's grey, and Lord Garth Greenhand's descendant, brokered terms. Seeds for orchard land rights, measured in lifetimes, not centuries. In the Red Keeps restored Solar Jon convened dawn councils with scribes who recorded quotas and tallies until wax pooled at candle stubs. Myrcella spent daylight among smallfolk districts, listening more than speaking. She sat with weavers charting wages, with septons rebuilding orphan dormitories, with sellswards who now patrolled streets under a new badge. A weirwood leaf entwined with lion's tail, argent on sable. At dusk, she reported to Jon, voice hoarse yet bright. "There a plague kettle needs herbs. There a widow begs timber to mend roof." He assigned resources swiftly, trusting her ledger. Tyrion served as chancellor, coin counter, jester when spirits flagged. Davos oversaw harbor reconstruction, cursing tide schedules. Sansa governed the Riverlands corridor from Maidenpool, implementing grain ceiling prices. Arya vanished into warrens, dismantling smuggler gangs, weaponized by Qyburn's surviving alchemists. Brienne, bearing new title captain of the Crown's Guard, drilled recruits from both sexes. Steel roses, they were called, armored in petals of red-stained plate, hammered from melted Lannister sigils. Jaime acted as her lieutenant, gold hand now capped with forged steel capable of parrying blades. Bran remained mostly within the tower of the Hand's restored library, pupils clouding as he warged ravens that surveyed border trouble. When he spoke, his voice often emerged hours after questions, yet answers proved prescient. One dusk he summoned Tyrion. "Port taxes must lessen within 8 months," he said. Tyrion scratched his chin. "Why? We need coin to pay reapers." "The narrow sea will birth storms no Drummond outruns," Bran replied. "When hulls break, we must not break with them." Tyrion blinked, but set quills in motion to adjust tariffs. Varys might have smiled. One balmy evening beneath a half-rebuilt colonnade overlooking the river, Myrcella greeted an unexpected visitor. Sir Balon Swan, newly named Castellan of Storm's End. He bore a sealed parchment from Princess Shireen Baratheon, rightful Lady of Storm's End after Stannis' demise. In loopy script, Shireen pledged 10 galleys of grain if the crown recognized her orphan status by granting guardianship to Jon and Myrcella jointly until she reached majority. Reading that request, Myrcella felt tears prick. Loyalty offered not for gold but for safety beneath a new standard. Jon accepted guardianship. Rhaegal ferried him, Myrcella, and Ghost to Storm's End days later. Talons splitting sea spray. Shireen met them in a windswept courtyard, azure cloak flapping over grayscale scars. She knelt before Jon, but he raised her gently. "You are sister to us now," Myrcella said, embracing her. Shireen stiffened, unused to affection, then clung like a girl half her 8 years. That night, they supped on crab stew while the sea crashed below basalt walls, forging alliance not of lords, but orphans bound by hard winters. Such journeys repeated, to Old Town where Maester Samwell presented a ledger of tallow and parchment shortages, to Sunspear where Prince Corrine parried lessons in spear technique with Myrcella beneath orange trees, to Sisterton where Arya accepted the fealty of House Sunderland after exposing their smuggling network. Each visit sowed kernels of trust, yet seeds sprout alongside weeds. As harvest neared, rumors surfaced of Sons of the Lion, a secret circle of die-hard Lannister loyalists, hoarding wildfire kegs buried beneath grain stores to sabotage the new order. One chill morning, a storehouse in Flea Bottom erupted, killing 60. Investigation uncovered the sigil of a twin-tailed crimson lion. Scorched into support beams, Myrcella took that fire personally. She convened night courts, questioned prisoners, traced shipments of naphtha, fingernails blackened with soot. She followed leads into catacombs where skeletons of children lay half-covered in emerald glass beads. Failed experiments of Qyburn's last apprentices. Rage gripped her. Memory of Tommen's gentle hands clutching kittens flooded mind. She emerged from tunnels as though from tomb, face streaked. Jon found her on the rampart, leaning over churning bay. "I fear the lion in me," she whispered as gulls circled. "It teaches me ways to hurt." Jon laid a hand on hers. A sword knows both harvest and slaughter. The wielder chooses. He paused. Let justice swing, not vengeance. So she chartered a people's inquest. 3 judges chosen from guilds, septons, and soldier ranks. Trials proved swift. Conspirators hung at gallows gate. When the last body swung, Myrcella ordered the scaffold, dismantled, and timber used to build play wagons for orphan fairs. Some called the sentence merciless, others merciful. She accepted both names. Autumn arrived draped in banners of copper leaves. The city bustled with looms weaving wool cloaks for northern winter markets. Fishermen lined newly repaired piers, nets brimming with silver herring. Septons rung bells not for war but harvest festival. The first since long before the walkers breached the wall. On festival eve, Jon walked the street of silk, no longer lined with shuttered brothels, but with lantern stalls. Pastry sellers, troops of jugglers, tossing colored balls. He wore plain jerkins, hair tied back, Ghost trotting ahead sniffing roasted chestnuts. Few recognized him, fewer cared, busy bartering honey twists. The anonymity eased him. He bought 2 candied lemons, the kind Sansa once coveted, and carried them up narrow stairs to the Tower of the Hand where Myrcella worked late. She sat over parchments. Sleeves rolled, ink smudge at her jaw. He placed a lemon on each parchment stack. She looked up, exhaustion fading into smile. "Those cost you 3 groats," she teased. "4," he corrected. But the baker swore they carry luck. "Then taste." She bit into hers, eyes watering. Jon laughed, coughed at his own sour mouthful. For a heartbeat, they were not monarchs, but partner thieves of simple pleasure. Ghost begged. Myrcella shared rind. They spoke little. Content weighed words down to stillness. Outside, festival horns warmed the evening. Across the bay, torchlit barges ferried revelers. Myrcella closed her ledger, stretched. Jon wrapped an arm about her shoulders. Together they watched the moon crest over half-rebuilt rooftops, its light silvering the ash-dusted tiles until they gleamed like virgin snow. "Proof that scars could shine if polished by enough dawns," she asked softly. "Do you think peace will hold?" "Not forever," he admitted, "but longer than war if we keep tending it. A garden of lions and wolves, She rested her head against him. May it grow. Years later, songs would tell of the wolf-lion reformation, of council chambers carved from melted swords, of orphan granaries feeding 7 kingdoms, of a dragon that guarded skies not with fear, but as watchful shepherd. Scholars would debate whether the Council of Eight truly birthed democracy, or merely gilded monarchy anew, whether grain subsidies or wildfire terror quelled rebellion, whether Myrcella's execution edicts proved harsher than her mother's. Yet in streets where plague once walked, children chased kites shaped like direwolves and lions entwined, their laughter rising above hammer clang and gull cry. Far in the north, Winterfell's heart tree endured, its leaves scarlet as fresh wounds yet no longer weeping. Ravens perched in branches, feathers puffed against frost, carrying messages of harvest yield, scholastic treatises, invitations to midwinter courts. Bran, older yet uncreased by time, saw through their eyes as they winged across calm skies. He watched a queen in gray furs ride with her king beside White Knife's icy banks, helping a farmer ride a wagon. He watched Rhaegal's son himself on Dragonstone's cliffs, wings stretching like sails. He watched ships slip between Isles of Faces and Sisterton, holds full of grain and wine, not iron and flame. And he smiled, knowing paths always branched anew, that no promise ever stayed finished, that gardens must be weeded and watered and hoped over. But on this day, at this hour, the realm hushed not in fear but in quiet industry, an uncommon music of hammers, lutes and hammering hearts, believing tomorrow would not steal what today built. Within King's Landing's rebuilt council hall, circular, chairs of maple, and reforged steel polished mirror bright, 8 voices murmured amicably over parchment drafts. Myrcella, hair streaked sun gold and silver both, presided over debate on canal tolls. Jon sat at her right, brown eyes intent, yet lips curved in that faint smile she first saw on Winterfell's battlement. The morning ghost welcomed her. Minute by minute, law by law, they shaped futures never foreseen by seers of dragon or stag or lion. Outside, festival lanterns bobbed along the Street of Sisters. A little girl balanced on a stool to hang her paper wolf lion by a baker's doorway. Wind caught it, lantern spun. Tiny candle flickered within, casting pale light on her round face. She clapped, delighted, unaware of kingdoms welded to allow such simple joys. Lantern by lantern, the street became a river of gentle light, a promise carried forward not by crowns or claws, but by quiet hands lifted toward the dark, believing dusk could be beautiful when many flames burned together. And high above, unseen save by ravens, the scarred stones of the Red Keep glimmered under moonlight, no longer a throne of blades but a house of many rooms, each warmed by fire, each door left open, echoing with the soft, ongoing work of peace. The year the wild roses bloomed crimson across the riverlands, Jon Snow learned that peace, like a field left fallow, invited seeds both nourishing and poisonous. Morning sun slanted through the arched windows of the circular council hall, striping the newly polished oak floorboards and catching motes of sawdust still drifting from the carpenter's work. Outside, gulls wheeled over the black water, their cries weaving through the muffled clamor of masons, laying the final stones of the rebuilt southern curtain wall. Inside, 8 chairs stood evenly spaced around a round table, fashioned from the red-heart trunk of a Stormland's ironwood felled by lightning centuries before. Each chair bore a unique sigil carved into the backrest, though their order changed weekly to prevent any single banner from claiming the sunlit position. Jon, hood thrown back to dry from the dawn's dew, traced the shallow carving on his chair, direwolf entwined with mountain aconite, and listened as Tyrion announced the census returns. The dwarf's voice, raspy from late nights drafting trade charters, echoed faintly off fresh lime-washed walls. According to newly sworn scribes, King's Landing now housed 142,000 souls, nearly half children, a figure that still lagged pre-war heights, but exceeded all projections. Myrcella, quill poised over a parchment of her own calculations, arched a brow at the mention of children. She had petitioned the guilds for expanded orphan dormitories, only to be told the coffers could not spare Cedar for more bunks until next quarter. Cedar will wait, she murmured without lifting her gaze. Children's lungs cannot have the Loomrites weave straw pallets. We will find Cedar when their feet grow too long for straw. Tyrion tapped the ledger. I remind the council that we remain 40,000 gold dragons in arrears from importing Reach grain to cover last winter's shortfall. If we divert funds toward straw pallets, then perhaps keep the coffers from smuggling out through corrupt harbor masters. Davos grumbled, pulling at his salt and pepper beard. We caught 2 yesterday demanding bribes from every Dornish crane captain. Confiscated 16 casks of red wine. Flogged the men public-like as warning. Public flogging breeds resentment, said Lady Lyanna Valerian, newest member of the council, her pale eyes catching the window light like moonlit seas. Best to dock their wages, send them to break stone for the new causeway. Sweat buys repentance quieter than whips. Jaime, seated between Brienne and Gendry as military liaison, snorted. Sweat buys blisters. Whips buy memories. Brienne rolled her eyes. She and Jaime still disagreed on discipline, but agreed on nearly everything else, a fact that both amused and unsettled Jon. At the far side, Bran stirred, ivory-carved chair creaking. There are ripples running west from the Vale, he said, voice slow, measuring distances no one else could see. Word of the council's generosity spreads faster than the coffers can match. If harbor masters pinch, bandits grow bold. Wages should rise, but overseers fear to cut profits. When profit becomes a god, greed grows teeth. Silence settled. Jon felt the council's collective weight swing toward him like a pendulum waiting for gravity's verdict. He cleared his throat. The coffers are bone thin, that is true. But so are the bellies of every orphan who shelters under our peace. We can patch coffers later. We'll patrol the roads to keep merchants' profits flowing, but we will tax those profits again when grain shipments double next harvest. For now, docks must run free of bribes. Dockmasters found guilty will spend a moon turn building straw pallets from March Reed under Sir Brienne's watch. No flogging. Sweat will suffice. Jaime opened his mouth, closed it again when Myrcella laid a hand on his forearm. Tyrion sighed, nodded, etched an amendment. Ace, you command. He regarded the ink drying on the parchment that would circulate through every guild hall, then added, "We'll need more scribes. So train them," Myrcella replied, eyes glinting. "Every orphan able to read earns quill and board. Every scribe we mint frees a farmer to plow. Every plow feeds 10 bellies." The council adjourned before midday. Brienne marched off to reorganize watch rotations. Jaime followed, rolling his shoulders as though expecting the ghost of a whip. Gendry limped away, favoring a bruised thigh from a night spent hammering scorpion bolts back into anything but weapons. Davos departed for the harbor, accompanied by 2 silent, unsullied, now serving the city's customs office. Tyrion tucked the census scrolls under his arm and complained loud enough for Jon to hear about being too sober for mathematics. Only Myrcella lingered. She stood by the window, palm pressed to sun-warmed stone, gaze fixed on a cluster of barges chugging upriver. Flat-bottomed craft, laden with newly quarried granite from Dragonstone. Their sails bore Daenerys' 3-headed dragon. Though these days, the sigil lacked fiery tongues, replaced instead by plowshares and wheat sheaves. Myrcella's breathing slowed. She counted barges, measured the thickness of granary walls still wanting faces, judged how many stones would be left to pave the unfinished East Bank levee. Jon approached quietly, though she sensed him, and spoke first. "I've done the sums thrice," he said, voice thin with fatigue. "If those ships arrive without bribes, we can finish the river levee before thaws. If the levee stands, spring floods will spare the slums." He studied her profile. Shadows of sleepless nights beneath eyes once bright as midday suns, but now tempered by watchfire and ledger soot. "It will hold," he assured. She exhaled, though tension lingered in the slope of her shoulders. "We treat peace like a wound. Stitch it, salve it, until memory of bleeding recedes. Yet wounds itch when they heal. People scratch where itches, reopen scabs. Oh, we'll bind scratches before they fester. He reached for her hand. She squeezed his fingers, then pulled away gently to gather her scrolls. You promised to lead the orphan procession to the Queen's orchard, she reminded. They've pruned the pomegranate rose in your honor. He grimaced, remembering the orchard's dusty lanes and the sweet bitter fruit he once shared with Sam in the castle black kitchens. If they hope I'll sing harvest hymns, they overestimate the mood of my voice. Then let your silence be the hymn. Presence alone heals. Her smile, soft but wry, lingered just long enough for him to catch. They descended spiral stairs worn shiny by 300 years of boots, emerged into a courtyard where carpenters shaped beams beneath a vast cradle of scaffolding. The stones of Maegor's holdfast, though blackened by wildfire, had been left as monument. Charred skeleton ribs bleached under sun. A throng of children waited there, each wearing a wreath of dried starflowers. When Jon stepped forward, they hushed, wide-eyed. When Myrcella knelt, they crowded her, tugging at her wool cloak, begging stories of the north. One small girl, freckles splashed across her nose like flecks of cinnamon, shyly offered a bundle of scrolls tied with string. Lessons, she whispered. We wrote them ourselves. Letters to send to Castle Black Ravens. Myrcella accepted, expression brightening. Jon ruffled the girl's hair, remembered Old Bear's booming laugh when Jon first mailed a letter home to Robb full of run-on sentences and inkwell blotches. They set off for the orchard. Myrcella leading the column, children skipping, Jon trailing with 2 guards and a wagon laden with baskets of bread. The route wound through Candle Lane, once red-garbed with brothel lanterns, now strung with prayer ribbons and bundles of thyme hung to dry. Shopkeepers paused to wave. Soldiers leaned on spears, nodding. Peace looked fragile but tangible. At the orchard gate, an unexpected messenger waited. Sir Balon Swan again. Dusty from the King's Road, Storm's End crest glowing under grime. He dismounted, bowed, eyes flitting to the children. Apologies, your graces. A letter of urgency from Lord Manderley at White Harbor. He handed Jon a sealed tube. Jon broke the wax, direwolf imprint, and scanned the parchment. Lines etched by a hand trembling less from age and more from haste. His brows knit. What news? Myrcella asked. He folded the letter. Manderley reports raids along the northern coast. Ships bearing Kraken sails, blacked to mask sigil. Villages burned, sheep taken. Mallfolk slain. How many ships? Balon asked. 3 galleys by his count. But survivors claim a 4th, larger, bearing masts of bone. Mendo. Myrcella's breath caught. Bone masts. The silence? Jon offered, though Euron Greyjoy had died beneath the Red Keep, flinging insults even as Jaime's sword pierced his heart. Or some pretender taking up his corpse's mantle. Balon pointed east, where pale sails of a merchant cog drifted between riverbanks. Iron-born hunger for chaos. A kraken always sprouts new tentacles. If they raid, they test your reach. Storm's End ports also whisper of corsairs, perhaps the same. Myrcella's eyes searched Jon's. We can't abandon the levy. And we cannot leave northern coasts undefended. We won't, Jon said. He looked to the children who now plucked unripe pomegranates, squealing at bitter seeds. But today, these young ones need their queen. I'll dispatch ravens to Yara. Have her Iron Fleet sweep the Bight. Grey Worm can spare unsullied marines from Dragonstone. I leave at dawn to join Manderley with a rider detachment. Ghost will track burnt trails. Myrcella nodded slowly, though worry gnawed. And I will hold the city until your return. She turned to Balon. Send message to Storm's End. Muster galleys under the banner of the Council of 8. We hunt krakens together. Balon saluted, boot scuffing dust. His horse's hooves clattered as he galloped off. Jon lingered while Myrcella led the children inside the orchard. Sunlight dappled her through sycamore leaves. Laughter rose around her as she modeled how to twist pomegranate blooms into circle crowns. He felt a tug in his chest, a wish to stay, to watch petals catch in her hair. But duty called him north again. Every road branched. His feet followed frost-like paths. Still, he promised himself. This journey would be swift. Winter's ghosts no longer stalked him. He would ride back to her before the first snowflake kissed the city ramparts. 3 days later, Jon's party crested the ridge above Torrhen Square. The keep jutted from cropland like a blunt spear. Smoke curled from chimneys, but also from char heaps where barns once stood. The smell of burnt grain clung to the air. Jon's horse snorted, stamping. Ghost padded ahead, weaving between corpses of sheep, half-skinned by raiders. The wolves had claimed what Ironman left. Lady Lyanna Mormont rode beside him, small frame armored in ringmail that jingled at each step. She'd insisted on joining, though her maester still scolded her for an arrow wound earned at Winterfell's walls. When she saw the smoldering barns, her jaw tightened. Kraken filth, she spat. They wait until our men are planting, then strike. She lifted a horn to her lips. Mournful blast carried across fields. From the keep's gatehouse climbed the flag of Houselock, inverted, a sign of distress. Within the yard they found Lord Farron Locke, arm in sling, blood dried in a matted beard. He greeted Jon with a fist to chest, bowed to Lyanna, then waved them to charred benches by the well. His recitation proved grim. 5 longships in total, sails scraped bare, timber stained pitch black. Raiders stormed ashore before dawn, slew a dozen guards, plundered stores, torched pastures. They took no captives except 3 fisherwomen, rumored to possess knowledge of hidden creeks, valuable for smuggling. What colors flew? Jon probed. None, Locke spat. But their shields bore carved eyes, one blue, one white. Jon exchanged a glance with Lyanna. The silence's sigil, twin eyes dripping blood. Yet Euron lay dead. Some fanatic clung to his banner. Scouts reported the raiders sailed northwest. Jon assembled 200 mounted archers, 60 Mormont shield maidens, and what skirmishers Locke could spare. They rode along the sea road chasing smoke plumes of fishing villages. Each site told same story. Nets cut, smokehouses raised, bodies flung to gulls. No gold was taken, only provisions, salted cod, rye flour, casks of whale oil, supplies for long voyages. By dusk of the 4th day, they reached Wolf's mouth of a river where limestone cliffs bit into slate sea. From clifftop, Jon spotted masts below, moored in a cove hidden by jutting rocks. Not 5 but 7 ships, 2 larger than longships, perhaps captured Dromans retrofitted with slaughter decks. Lanterns glowed greenish on prows. Skulls mounted at rails winked in torchfire. Jon assembled war council among stunted pine. His plan was simple. Archers on cliff for covering volleys, Mormont shield maidens descending goat paths to capture bluff. He, Lyanna, and Locke's men flanking from beach, drawing raiders outward. Ghost would scout ahead. The attack began at dawn. Arrows rained, fletchings hissing. Ironborn scrambled up gangways, howling war songs, only to meet bare shield wall. Jon's charge crashed into raider flank. Long claw bit mail and flesh, each strike releasing breath plumes in chill air. He saw Lyanna knock a helmet clean off a man twice her size. Saw Locke, wounded arm strapped, wield flail with other hand. Ghost hamstrung raiders trying to flee. Mid-battle, Jon noticed a towering figure on flagship deck. Woman in mailed skirts, black hair whipping, wielding a curved blade of Valyrian steel. Nightfall, House Harlaw's heirloom. She shouted orders to her crew, guiding catapult rotations hurling oil barrels toward shore. Jon realized she must be Harren the Harlaw's bastard daughter, once betrothed to Euron before he murdered her mother. Revenge curdled her eyes. He signaled archers, Half-dozen shafts peppered the ship's quarterdeck. She deflected two with nightfall, took one through thigh, snarled. Jon spurred horse into surf, but a wave smashed beast sidewise. He plunged waist-deep, trudging toward gangplank. Wave broke again, revealing Ghost paddling near hull, jaws snapping at grappling ropes. Raider spears jabbed from above, cutting the direwolf's shoulder. Ghost yelped, fell into foaming brine. Jon's vision tunneled crimson. He vaulted the gangplank, parried bladed oar, thrust long claw through attacker's gut. Deck pitched. Salt spray stung open wounds. The Harlaw woman limped toward him, blade glowing faintly. She grinned. The Wolf King returns to sea. Leave these coasts, he growled. Sea leaves nothing. She lunged. Valyrian steel met Valyrian. Shrieking note rang. Jon felt shock bite arm bones. She pivoted, slash aimed at jugular. He ducked, hammered pommel into her wound. She stumbled, but blade flicked up, drawing shallow scratch across his jaw. He tasted blood, cold iron on tongue. Fight circled mast. Jon feigned left, slid low, right, carved her hamstring. She collapsed, nightfall skittering across boards. Yet she laughed. A wet rasp. Kill me, wolf. The sea will birth more. Jon held sword at her throat. Surrender. Stand trial. She spat bloody foam. Trails are footprints in sand. Tide washes. She reached beneath breastplate, pulled a small green orb. Wildfire sphere. Jon cursed, grabbed her wrist. But she crushed glass. Liquid hissed. Flames erupted emerald, devouring flesh and wood. He jerked back as heat licked. Fire leapt rigging. Sails ignited. He slashed mooring rope, leapt over gunwale into sea. Water quenched hair-singed flames. He surfaced coughing, waves lifting him toward shore. On beach Lyanna shouted orders, retreat from Inferno. Arrows ceased. Archers scrambled down. Flaming flagship drifted outward, catching another hull. Soon two ships burned, masts crackling, black smoke coiling. Surviving raiders fled in three smaller boats, pulling hard for open water. Jon stumbled ashore, Ghost limping beside him, fur smoldering but eyes bright with fury. Lyanna reached them, expression mixture of admiration and exasperation. Couldn't wait for my shield wall, could you? He half smiled, spat brine. Had to save the dog. Locke's men counted casualties. 17 Northmen dead, 40 wounded. Raider corpses littered surf like driftwood. They salvaged crates of stolen grain. Freed the 3 fisherwomen bound in holds. The women told of a hidden island lair where more raiders gathered supplies. Lordsport deserters and Broken Branch pirates allied under banner of the Bide God. A cult rising around Euron's corpse, claiming his soul rode the depths, sentencing traitors to drown. Jon ordered scouting longboats to locate the island, but he felt time pressing. City needed him. Winter would ride sooner than cult prophecy. He left Lyanna in command with orders to build beacon towers along coastlines, garrison with archers and ravens, any sail without council seal to be warned, then shot. He and Locke rowed back toward White Harbor to rouse further levies should raiders mass anew. Before departing Wolf's Mouth, Jon spent a night beneath wind-bent pines burying the Harlaw woman's charred remains. He dug alone, using a sea axe scavenged from deck, Ghost standing guard. He marked the grave with driftwood. Let her storm cease, he whispered to sea. Waves answered, indifferent. That night he dreamed. Myrcella standing on King's Landing's levee holding a child with hair dark, as his butt eyes green as wildfire. Thunder rumbled behind her. She turned, smiling, then eyes widened. Hand reaching, he woke to hooves clopping, dawn leaking through canvas. Omen or longing, he could not say, but fear nestled in his gut like frost. In King's Landing, Myrcella fought battles quieter but no less perilous. One evening, returning from the orphan dormitories, She discovered a wax-sealed missive slipped beneath council chamber door. No sigil marked it, only the phrase Queen of Ashes, penned in precise script. Inside, a single iron coin, Valyrian dragons with Euron's face crudely hammered over Aegon the Conqueror's. A message. The Kraken cult knew her seat. They claimed Valyrian right like conqueror of old. She convened the small council at once. Tyrion inspected coin, frowning. Crude, yet the metal's true. Someone's melting royal ingots. Who holds a forge hot enough? Davos asked. Any smith with a bellows, Gendry said, shrugging. But Valyrian iron is scarce. Perhaps Essosi smugglers bring bars. Missandei entered with parchment. Harbor manifests of incoming Essos galleys. One vessel of Volantine make had offloaded sealed barrels described as ink dye. She scanned signature. Captain's surname, Pike-born. Bronn lounged in window picking teeth with dagger. Volantine dye sells dear. Easy to hide powder for bombs under blue indigo. Easy to slip iron too. Myrcella paced. If they smuggle through harbor, bribes still fester despite Yohn's decree. Tyrion drummed fingers. We replaced harbor masters, but we left gate clerks. They stamp manifests. One coin buys 2 stamps. So root out gate clerks, Brienne said. But quietly. If cult smells hunt, they'll vanish. Myrcella agreed. They formed a shadow net. Arya to watch clerks. Bronn to trail Volantine sailors. Davos to double-check ledgers. Over days, fragments linked. Barrels moved from harbor to an abandoned cothouse in Flea Bottom, flagged for herbal tinctures. At night, faint green glow leaked through cracks where no lamp should burn. Myrcella ordered a silent raid. Unsullied squads closed streets. Brynden Tully's nephew Edmund led gold cloaks inside. They seized cask upon cask of wildfire concentrate. In the basement they found forgers striking coins with Euron's face, using stolen mint dyes. One clerk attempted escape. Arya pinned him with knife through foot. Under interrogation, he confessed cult plan. Use coins to pay starving slum gangs for sabotage during upcoming festival, when levy crowds would grant cover. Wildfire bombs would detonate beneath the levee's keystone, sending river flood into shantytown and royal docks, humiliating queen whose pet project drowned her subjects. The revelation shook Myrcella. She eyed the levee each dawn, imagining water roaring through breaches. She ordered triple guard, sealed tunnel culverts, posted ward-trained direhounds along banks. Yet fear lingered like mildew, for she knew clay pots could hide in any fish crate. She missed Jon's steady quiet, his counsel that felt like oak roots anchoring small tasks to larger purpose. Letters she penned to him went unanswered longer than expected. Ravens lost to storms, said White Harbor rookers. Sansa soothed. Ravens often vanished over the bight. Still, Myrcella walked nights across ramparts, wind-tugging cloak, thinking of bone-masked ships prowling. 10 days after Jon buried the raider captain. His force reached White Harbor. Lord Manderley welcomed them with feast of pickled herring and onion pies. Between bites he reported last sightings. Remaining Kraken ships fled east around Skagos, perhaps to seek refuge in Essosi ports. Yara's fleet pursued, but weather turned, storms scattered sails. Jon thanked Manderley, promised Northern Patrol subsidies, but his heart soaked only news of King's Landing levy sabotage. He departed before dawn with small retinue, riding hard south along King's Road. By the time he reached Maidenpool, festival day had dawned. He spurred on, racing sunset. At dusk's lavender glow, he crossed Dragon Gate to find city thrumming. Torches danced along levee, crowds cheered as musicians piped. Yet his return brought no relief. He sensed tension in air, an undercurrent. Ghost peeled off, nose to cobblestones, hackles raised. Jon followed Hunch along culvert walkway under levee buttress. There, 3 cloaked figures prying iron grates. He drew Longclaw. Ghost silent. Figures heard. Spun. Blades of cheap iron flashing. He parried first. Riposte drove through collarbone. Second lashed at Ghost, but Direwolf's jaws crushed forearm, screams stifled. Third dropped cask into culvert and fled toward crowd. John pursued. The man shoved through dancers, drawing Flint's striker from pouch. John tackled him near lantern stand. Flint sparked, but John seized wrist, forced hand away. Man cackled, teeth filed to points. "Blue-eyed god wakes," he hissed. John head-butted, felt cartilage crack. Striker fell. Gold cloaks arrived, bound the saboteur. John opened cask. Wildfire, slurry fizzing. He ordered disposal into deep sewer pits, sealed with clay. News spread. King captured, cult bomber. Cheers erupted along Levee. Yet Myrcella, hearing of the near catastrophe, trembled behind closed doors. She met John at Council Hall long after midnight. Torchlight painted shadows across her drawn face. He embraced her. She stiffened and melted, pressing forehead to his chest. "I thought River would swallow us," she whispered. "I feared I'd drown your work." "Our work," he corrected, thumb caressing her cheek. "Sea may birth tentacles, but we grow hands stronger." She managed a laugh muffled in tunic. Poetic for a Northman. He kissed her hair. "You taught me words matter." In days following they tried saboteurs, hanged ringleader at River Gallows. Yet John insisted death alone would not halt cult. They must choke supply lines, shut down coin forgeries, intercept Cersei smuggles. They convened emergency council. Tyrion suggested establishing a royal mint, overseen by all 8 regions, to track precious metal. Davos proposed a harbor charter requiring double manifests, signed by 2 guild witnesses. Brienne drafted patrol schedules along Levee night and day. Myrcella added bold idea. Convert raider-captured ships into hospital barges moored inside Levee, floating dormitories that doubled as floodbreak if sabotage breached wall. Council approved. Months passed. Winter sniffed edges but did not bite. Crops abundant. Levee withstood spring melt. Kraken cult dwindled, starved of coin. Children played along orchard lanes, chasing lambs near restored granaries. The wolf-lion queen walked incognito among them, hair braided loosely, simple sandals dusty. When she returned to palace after sunset, John waiting on balcony, she told of beggar girls who now recited alphabet, of street minstrels teaching harvest songs. He listened, content. But north of wall, winds shifted. Bran's ravens brought troubling visions. Green mists swirling over shattered ice fortress, shapes stirring beneath snowdrifts. Magic seldom dies, only sleeps. Bran cautioned. Old powers wake when men grow complacent. John pondered message by fireside, staring into embers while Myrcella slept. Silhouettes softened by candle. In his mind flickered image. Blue eye glinting in darkness, but not walkers, and not man's. Maybe dream, maybe branch path unseen. He rose quietly, walked to balcony, inhaled night air smelling faintly of pomegranate and sea. Below, city lanterns twinkled like constellations. Promise of peace glowed. Yet beyond horizon, tides of history churned. He accepted truth. Garden tending never ends. He whispered a vow to stars. He would guard realm with every breath, with steel and quill, with love and watchful caution. And when new storms rose, he and Myrcella would face them. Wolf and lion, claw and tooth, heart and hearth, knowing they had forged not a throne but a living realm. Imperfect yet resilient. In that realm, children thrived, coins honest, Levee strong and hope like spring wheat, burst green through ashes. He turned back inside, lay beside her, felt her heartbeat calm as orchard breeze. Sleep claimed him at last, carrying him into dreams not of war but of planting. Seeds pressed into soft earth, watered by hands of many banners. Above, the sun shone on fields stretching farther than memory. And in the hush between heartbeats, he believed such fields would outlast any winter. So long as gardeners remained vigilant, and refused to bury hope beneath fear.